Hello everyone, welcome to What If Deku Was the Infernal God and Went to Highschool DxD Part 1. Before we start, please go support Ricky1 for writing that awesome fanfic. Prologue. With Deku. We could see Deku near Rimuru, Tanjiro, Sung and Subaru. All with their respective wives in front of them. Rimuru started whispering and talking to Deku. Rimuru, will you help me, kid? Deku got it. Women started paying attention to them. Tanjiro, what are you talking about there? Is it to eat? He said, taking a drop of sweat from Sung, Deku, Subaru and Rimuru. Rimuru, depends on the sense. Tanjiro, I see. Rimuru, but will you help me on this one, Deku? Deku, there's nothing to do anyway, I'll help. Rimuru smiled at that and raised his finger, about to snap. But when he was about to snap his fingers, Deku's respective wives stopped him. Brunilda, where is he going? She asked seriously, looking into Rimuru's eyes. Rimuru, he's just going to help me out there, man business. Do not interfere. Deku's wives narrowed their eyes at the answer. Aphrodite, but he is ours and we have a right to know. Rimuru, who dictates what happens here, me? Are you revoking my authority as the leader of the outer gods? Aphrodite, no, we just don't trust you when it comes to sending my Deku to an alternate dimension. Rimuru, trust your father, he said, adjusting the sleeves of his shirt. So he snapped his fingers. Subaru, what world did you send him to, Master Rimuru? He asked, looking at Rimuru. Rimuru, DxD Universe. Tanjiro and Sung started laughing uncontrollably, which intrigued Subaru and made Deku's wives afraid. Tanjiro, ha 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 ha, what a pity, Deku, but it looks like you're going to die. Rimuru started laughing too. Ayumi, Dad, where did you send my husband? She yelled in an authoritative tone. Having an appearance quite similar to her father, Rimuru, changing only the breasts and gender. Rimuru, relax, you don't have to be so nervous, he said, laughing, making Ayumi frown. Ayumi, father, I'll just say it one more time. Where did you send my husband? But Rimuru just rolled his eyes. Ayumi, seeing that she wouldn't have answers from her father, asked Sung and Tanjiro. Ayumi, Tanjiro, what is this DxD universe? Tell me. Tanjiro, hey, just because you're Master Rimuru's daughter means you have authority over us. He soon fell silent upon receiving the looks of his wives. Tanjiro sighed in defeat and spoke in an amused tone. Tanjiro, too bad for brother Deku, huh, Sung? But it looks like he won't have such a good life. Sung smiled. Sung, true, your life will be quite short. Ayumi, answer my question right away. Tanjiro, how annoying you are. Ayumi snorted in response. Tanjiro, all I can say is that if you guys aren't quick, Deku might end up having a new group of wives. Ayumi appeared in front of him and grabbed him by the shirt collar. Ayumi, how is it? Repeat. She started rocking Tanjiro, while the other wives had a bulging vein. Tanjiro, Master Rimuru sent him to a dimension where it's full of beautiful women. He takes Ayumi's hand away. If you're not quick, you'll end up losing your beloved husband, he said, teasing Deku's wives. Tanjiro, ha ha ha, brother Deku is bucked up. The last time I visited that dimension it was to destroy it, when I came back from there. He looked at his wives, who looked away whistling. Tanjiro, when I came back from there I got a smack from Ophis, Yuriko, Kimiko, Yuki, Kimi. Deku's wives looked at Rimuru as their bloodlust was unleashed. But Rimuru didn't show anything, of course, he was the strongest. The god of absolute void. Rimuru, hey Tanjiro, Sung and Subaru, I have a job for you too. When Tanjiro, Sung and Subaru were going to speak, their respective wives stopped him. Scarlet, you're not going anywhere, do you hear, Subaru? She said, taking Subaru's face and turning to her. Kimiko, the same goes for you, Tanjiro, she said, looking at him seriously, which made Tanjiro back off. Essel, same for you, are you listening, Sung? She said as her aura leaves. Sung B but. Yumi, but nothing, shut up and obey. Sung swallowed hard. Sung Tanjiro Subaru, damn, that's oppression. They thought, crying with their heads down. Rimuru, it's really a shame, but I mostly need Tanjiro. Then. He stomped on the ground, sending Tanjiro to another dimension. Rimuru ready. Tanjiro, thank you, father. He yelled as he disappeared, sucked into the crevice created by Rimuru. So Rimuru had to run from both Deku's wives and Tanjiro's wives. Deku-an. What the hell is happening? Man, how so? How the hell did I end up in a woman's womb? I expected Father Rimuru to send me into the body of a living child, but why did he send me to be reborn in a woman's womb? Not a particularly pleasant experience, I must say. It's awful. It was like being suspended in a place where you couldn't feel a thing. I spent 9 months in my mother's womb until I was born. My first memory of this new life was not of a hospital, but of a laboratory. Who brings a child to a laboratory? Will I be tortured since the day I was born? Crap. But I had realized that I was not alone. I could feel 3 presences next to me. Are you sure? It seemed to be a man by the voice. It's quite annoying not being able to open my eyes. Sorry, my friend, but unfortunately that's it. That voice sounds like a psychopath, quite dark, I must say, but nothing that can scare me. However, it looks like they were arguing about something, but specifically me, and the topic didn't look good. Are you sure you don't have a way out, Beelzebub-sama? Now it was a woman's tone, and from being so close to me, I assumed it would be my mother. Her body is well developed, but contains only minuscule amounts of human-level demonic energy. Demonic energy? Wait, won't you tell me I was reborn as a demon? Shit, if Tanjiro saw this. Oh, how embarrassing. I'm sorry, Sirzex Graphia, but that's the only option. What the buck is this option? And who is this one from Graphia and this one from Sirzex? I see, thanks anyway, Ajuka. I finally managed to open my eyes. Damn, I was tired. When I opened them, logos, they closed again. It's a curse to be a baby. But when I still had my eyes open, I could see a beautiful woman with long silver hair just like her eyes. She must be my mother, right? And again I went back to sleep. What a bag. Why the hell is she singing a lullaby? I don't want to sleep. Let me move my body, woman of the devil. But then I saw her crying. Am I that ugly when I was a baby? Damn, now I understand why my mother mistreated me. This beautiful woman started to move, and soon the bedroom door opened, and I could see a tall man with red hair and blue-green eyes looking at me sadly. Can't we do something different? This woman's voice sounded full of hope. Bro, are they going to do a plastic surgery on me? I'm just a baby. You think I haven't tried everything? I had already imagined him growing up and me teaching him to control his power. I was even imagining him playing with little Rias. He looked quite sad and his tone carried contempt for himself. But now he's not safe and we can't protect him at all. The red-haired man started to approach and took me in his arms. Hey, let me go, I want to be with this beautiful silver-haired woman. I found it disrespectful to me. It's raining? Wasn't I at the house just now? Finally opened my eyes and I turned to the silver-haired woman and saw her crying uncontrollably, and these tears fell on me. I'll do it quickly. Oh, he knows how to use magic. A low-ranking magic circle, how pathetic. Did he teleport me? That was unexpected. Now I can see myself next to a big building. It was painted bright yellow. If I found the person who painted this yellow, I swear I would kill. At least there was a nice parking lot, and you could see a garden right behind, that I can forgive. I'm sorry, but this is the only way to protect you. Your mother and I will always love you, even if we can't be there for you. She gave a sad smile and left me on the stairs in front of the building. She pressed the bell and disappeared in a magic circle. He abandoned me? Well, even I would forsake myself. A woman came to meet me and I saw that it was an orphanage. The woman took me inside. I had a good time there, and it was a good life. Well, it's better than being tortured, being cold, and starving. After a while I felt the energy that belonged to some crows. I think that's what people who have black wings are called, right? I don't remember the name now. Are you sure it's here? One of them had asked. Yes, that's right. The energy source is equal to the power of an ultimate class being. Who the hell are these guys? And what does ultimate mean? Is it some rating? Must be. The crows looked at me and started preparing something like a spear of light. And I just shook my hand in denial, but unintentionally. I ended up activating a power called Power of Destruction. It seems that this power is quite practical, and let's face it, it's a lot easier to use than my destruction skill. For unlike my skill that destroys all reason, origin, concepts, laws, and everything else, she is even capable of significantly affecting an entire hyperverse. Power of Destruction, even though it is not as destructive compared to my destruction skill, it will still be useful in a weak world like this. Well, with this energy released, everything around me was erased. Literally, everything was destroyed. I was quite surprised to be a lot more useful than I thought. I ended up killing all these crows, but the orphanage was also consumed. I bitterly regret doing this, but it was unintentionally. Years passed and I trained my mastery over this power of destruction. Spells, physical strength, and everything else I had plenty of knowledge. Wouldn't need it, I have guns and more. Over the years, I discovered that demons had an inborn weakness to the holy element and light. But I was immune to luz and sacred. I got involved in this supernatural world. I met a lot of people. Even when I was 5, I fought an extremely fun fight, and when I was 7, I fought another fight. It was fun, although I didn't use my power to the fullest. When I turned 10, I went to a town called Kuoh. An interesting thing was that my appearance was quite intriguing. I had long shoulder-length crimson hair. I still had my heterochromatic eyes, only they were blue-green and the other was silver. So I changed her to my original appearance, for at least I was used to my ugliness in that form. One day, as I was sitting in the park watching the children playing, because I've been through a lot of problems because of the mothers of these children, it even gives me chills. Just then a brown-haired boy with violet eyes came to me. She looked a lot like a brat. "Hi, my name is Irina, what's yours?" she asked me happily. I looked her up and down. "Izuku, my name is Izuku," I said in a monotone, as I didn't want to get involved with her. But she pulled my hand and took me to play. The next few days were uneventful, as usual. But the good thing was that I didn't have to go around killing what appeared. I could just be a normal kid, something I haven't been able to experience to this day. I met a boy named Issei Hayadu. He was just another acquaintance, just like Irina Shido. And speaking of her, think of a girl who made me think about committing suicide 100 times. Everything about her was God here, God there. I even thought about killing her. Irina's parents tried to take me in after I told her she was an orphan. 'Cause after they ate my food, they didn't want any other than her. Of course they would have this wish. I was trained by the food god himself, well, at least titled Father/Master Rimuru. But I preferred to be alone, besides that I didn't want to idolize a religion. Irina had to take a trip to England with her family. I didn't feel anything, my dead eyes didn't even feel sadness when she left, even though she is present in my life. But as a gift I gave her a scarf, a sacred scarf that protected its wearer from various harms. It was even hilarious to see the face of Irina's father, Tuji, as the scarf emanated more sacred aura than many sacred items that existed. So they left, and the last memory I have is seeing Issei talking to an old man in the square about the beauty of breasts. And with that he became a big tit-loving pervert. Well, can't blame him. A few more years went by and I realized that I had regained 10% of all my real power. I just looked for more and more strong opponents. This was my only and main objective. My strongest opponents were Shiva, the god of destruction, and Brahma, the god of creation from Hindu mythology. That's when I was bored, and unintentionally, to top it off, I simply invaded Mount Kailash, the home of the Trimurti Hindu gods, and fought Shiva. Though reluctant, Shiva hit and raised his weapon at me, asking how a child would fight him. The battle was fun, so much fun I can say it was even better, losing only to the fights I've had with Tanjiro, Sung and Subaru. Shiva rained down upon me waves of his divine power of destruction. He made me take 3 seals off my body. The fight was shown to all of Mount Kailash, who were amazed to learn that a 5-year-old was fighting Shiva. It was funny their reaction when I had destroyed the sun just because it was getting in my way. In the end, I came out victorious. But I was surprised, as Shiva didn't seem angry about being the loser. He seemed to be happy about it, and even organized a feast for me. That day, at the age of 5, I was declared one of the strongest existences in the world. During a conversation with him, Shiva gained my trust, and I revealed to him my true appearance and who my parents are. To say he was angry would be an understatement. The god of destruction was totally furious at what he heard. Even though I didn't really know who my family was, I still remembered their respective faces. And he told me I was part of Clan Gremry. A clan that prided itself on treating its own servants like family, and then their firstborn, Surzex, abandons his own son? For this one wanted to go down to the underworld and slaughter Surzex. Well, I don't know how the power level works in this dimension, but he was said to be the 3rd strongest existence, second only to the dragon god of infinity, Ophis, and the dragon god of dreams, Great Red. I was extremely surprised to hear the name, Ophis. Well, she was Tanjiro's wife. But I stopped him, told him he didn't have to. What surprised Shiva? I had no hatred or anger at Surzex or Grafia for abandoning me, or at Gremry. To tell you the truth, I can't feel any emotion. My eyes are totally dead and dull. After all that, I had asked him some questions about the supernatural world, in which he answered all. I discovered that I had a brother named Milikas, for whom I had no feelings. Shiva consoled me, thinking I was sad. He really gave me a father-son look. It was like Master/Father Rimuru did. It was quite comforting and invigorating. Time passed, and I came to consider Shiva as one of the most important people, whom I would do anything to help. He even invited me to be his right-hand man, but I turned it down because I wanted to see the world even more. He calmly accepted my answer and said that whenever I needed him, he would be there to help me. And obviously he said the same thing. I also talked a lot with Shiva's wives, Parvati, Kali and Durga. The 3 had very different personalities, but they are really friendly, but by far the most energetic and Parvati. In my travels I decided to write the songs that I received from Master/Father Rimuru as a gift. Seems like he had already guessed everything. I forgot that he was omniscient. Hee. I took all the songs and took them to an auditor who accepted right away. In short, I am considered the most famous and successful musician in the world. My most successful songs are the ones I sang in English. Well, I had mastery over any language I wanted to learn. So it wasn't too hard. I became a millionaire in just a few days and made huge investments that made me even more money, taking me over $20 billion. As soon as I turned 15, I declared my retirement, much to the sadness of the human and supernatural world, but I stated that I would do more shows every now and then. Information. Name Izuku. Age, quadrillion years, was trained by Rimuru. Race, mixed human god, mixed race spirit, mixed race dragon, mixed race. Visual. Powers, soul manipulation, energy manipulation, matter manipulation, conceptual manipulation, fate manipulation, origin manipulation, dream manipulation, chance manipulation, destruction manipulation, life manipulation, elemental manipulation, reality manipulation, abstract existence type 1, life manipulation, cosmic manipulation, probability manipulation, mind manipulation, time manipulation, space manipulation, fear manipulation, laws of physics manipulation, death manipulation, laws manipulation, void manipulation, existential erasure, reactive evolution, logic manipulation, dimensional manipulation, weather manipulation, absorption, chaotic manipulation, creation, summoning, chance, all types, emotion manipulation, plot manipulation, paradox manipulation, supernatural manipulation, totality manipulation, will manipulation, truth manipulation, perspective manipulation, existential control, text manipulation, all types, non-existence manipulation, manipulation of measurements, immortality types 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 11, regeneration A rank, intangibility all types. Elementary powers. All that exists, that will exist, and everyone that ever existed. Abilities, semi-full arsenal, destruction, primal magic, authority of origin, unrestrained body, supernatural condition, destruction, physical divinity, transmutation, zenith, black flames, white, red, pink, blue, gold, green, violet, brown, lightning authority, ice, fire, wind, earth, lava, light, darkness, water, power mimicry. Existential erasure, reactive evolution, power nullification. Divine eyes of destruction. Description: eyes that have the same properties as the old one, with just a few more added. Law manipulation, destruction manipulation, conceptual manipulation, death manipulation, existential erasure, origin manipulation, time manipulation, space manipulation. Mentality. Intelligence, semi-omniscient. Combat sheet. Dimensionality, N.A. Hierarchy, 1 plus high outer versal, it far exceeds the requirements for Tier 1A. Being able to affect/create/destroy states or regions that are completely transcendent over previous hierarchies and any extensions thereof. It is able to affect an infinite number of dimensions and universe, and can even destroy them. Existential status, abstract. Attack, irrelevant high outer versal. Defense, irrelevant high outer versal. Speed, omnipresence. Strength, irrelevant. Stamina, irrelevant. Range, irrelevant high outer versal. Variations, king of destruction/hell god, dragon, dragonoid, spirit, outer god. Physical and psychological weaknesses, none. Personality, playful, likes to provoke anyone, seeks a fight that is fun, very indifferent. Titles, king of destruction, god of hell, god of the black infernal gates, the king, god of destruction and creation, king of the mad dragons, spouse of the daughter of the absolute god, outer god, son of the primordial god. Dragon shape, dragonite shape, king shape. Infernal form, divine form. Academy Kuoh. A few days later. Kuoh, Japan. In a large mansion in the Japanese city of Kuoh, it was possible to see someone waking up in their room. The light passed through the window and illuminated the young man's body. A handsome young man who could only be described as handsome, his unearthly beauty capable of impressing any being, even the goddesses of beauty would be shocked by his appearance, and seeing him would make any woman, whether human or supernatural, have her body drowned in lust. Deku another day. It had been a few days since Deku had moved to Kuoh, but he still hadn't started his studies. He had used those days to settle in Kuoh, as well as buy a house and enroll in Academy Kuoh. His eyes roamed the room. His house was large, having 3 floors of extremely luxurious furniture of the highest class. Deku was considered one of the richest people in the world, not only for his extremely famous songs but also for having made several investments that make a lot of money to this day. Though he can't use all that money due to being a minor, and so it was necessary for him to be careful. Deku's guardian was the man who adopted him a few years ago, due to him needing a human law guardian. Even though Deku considers these laws a waste of time, he still had to follow them. He didn't want to go to school either, but his guardian told him to go. Deku's adoptive father was none other than the god of destruction, Shiva. Over the years, Deku has traveled all over the world and met many people. And at the age of 7 he was declared as the strongest existence, surpassing the Great Red and the Trihexa 666. It was at age 7 that Deku fought the Great Red and emerged victorious, bringing the dragon under his sway. Along these trips, Deku found some friends. Friends for Deku would be a strong word, it would be more for acquaintances, and also some enemies. And in this period, Deku had accepted to be Shiva's right-hand man. Deku helped Shiva whenever the god needed. Although Shiva was the god of destruction, he didn't cause senseless chaos and destruction, always preferring to find interesting things to do, and this usually ended with Deku trying to keep the god of destruction in line. Shiva even joked with Deku, saying that, although he wasn't raised by Xerxes and Graphia, he has a personality very similar to his mother. What differentiated was that Deku was more cruel and merciless. Being Shiva's right-hand man, Deku usually represented the god whenever he needed to. Although the Trimurti didn't meddle much in the supernatural world, Deku had to participate in several wars. But nothing that the ancient dragons wouldn't help him. All the gods that saw all the dragons being controlled by a child can't hide their surprise. And the worst, none were weak. All the dragons that Deku had at his disposal could face the god of destruction and emerge victorious. Even one was enough. Deku got into several fights against the Hindu god of war, and had even invaded Indra's palace to kill him, but he was stopped by Shiva. Shiva told Deku that the battle against Indra was necessary, and it was also a way to get rid of his boredom. And in the midst of this, Shiva ended up adopting Deku as his son, mainly due to human laws, as Deku was an orphan. Deku became known to everyone in the supernatural world as the king of the mad dragons, the one who held absolute control over dragons, and also for being Shiva's right-hand man, who is considered the strongest god in existence. Thus he was feared both for being Shiva's right-hand man and for being the king of mad dragons. That created fear in everyone who heard his name. Although extremely calm and cold, Deku had a short pavel and would cause destruction as soon as he angered him, as was the case with Grigori, who had 1/3 of all fallen angels devoured by Deku's dragons, just for angering him. Lucky for the fallen angels that Shiva intruded, otherwise, well, all of Grigori would have been destroyed and devoured. Sighing, Deku got up from the bed and went to the bathroom to do the basic needs. Coming out of the bathroom, Deku dressed in his clothes. He made his coffee so he could go to school. Later. Kuoh Academy. Not much is known about Kuoh Academy, other than the fact that it was originally a private school for girls. At some point, Kuoh Academy changed to a coeducational school and the new school building was built. Kuoh Academy has several divisions such as the primary division, secondary school and college. Kuoh Academy's high school division has several annual events such as the ball tournament, sports day, school trip for second-year students, and school festival. In front of the gates, several students were standing while watching two students. Deku was calmly walking towards Kuoh Academy, and the great luck was that he is wearing a mask. As he walked, all the students looked at him. My God, who is he? Yes, but that mask. Wait a minute, isn't that the singer Izuku? Asked one of them, making all the others widen their eyes in surprise. It's really him, she said with a huge smile on her face. This is amazing, shouted all together. Meanwhile, with the boys it was the opposite. Damn Casanova, die, said a boy with an angry expression. Yeah, damn Kiba wasn't enough, shouted the boy next door. Yeah, damn pretty boy, said the brown-haired boy. Deku looked out of the corner of his eye and saw that it was Issei. Some time later, Deku walked through the halls of Kuoh Academy towards the student council. Walking through the halls, he realized that it was kind of hard to find. If he asked the girls, they would run away while crying. If he asked the boys, they cursed him. However, he managed to smell the scent coming from Sona Citri and headed towards her. Deku, after a long time, he managed to reach the student council room. Knocking on the door, he heard a come in. When he entered the room, his eyes met that of a bespectacled young woman with a slender figure, short-cut black hair and violet eyes. She mostly wore a girl's school uniform. She had another young woman with straight black hair that extends to her knees, with split bangs and heterochromatic eyes, with a violet left eye and a light brown right eye. When the two saw Deku at the door, they couldn't help but blush. Softening her blush a little, Sona asked. Sona, so who are you? Deku, I'm Izuku, a new student, and I came to get my schedule, he said as he entered the room. Sona's eyes widened at the slightest when she heard the name. Sona, I see, I'm Sona Shirtorai, the student council president. Deku nodded his head as he turned his gaze to Tsubaki, who was still blushing. Tsubaki, aha, I'm Tsubaki Shinra, the vice president, she said with a smile while blushing. Deku nodded his head. Sona, please sit down. Deku went to the chair and sat down. Deku turned his gaze to Sona as Tsubaki served them tea. Deku, what a disappointment, he thought, looking at how weak Sona was. Sona's aura was a light blue hue like water, the texture looked a lot like water. He looked bored at her, not the water magic itself. After all, water was one of the 4 great elements. However, just from Sona's aura, Deku could already tell it was disappointing. But even so, Sona has a great talent and will become much stronger. Deku also possessed a unique aura. It was pure chaos and destruction. An extremely evil aura that looked like a pit of infinite gravity that engulfed and destroyed everything around it. A black hole. Deku's mastery over his power of destruction was astounding. Even Shiva found Deku's mastery and potency of power of destruction absurd. Her chaotic aura carried chaos and destruction wherever she went. Anyone who saw her would enter a state of madness. Needless to say, Deku is doing everything he can to contain it so it doesn't affect everything around it and unintentionally destroy the space. Sona, who was in front of Deku, pointed to a chessboard that was there. Sona, play? Deku, come on, he said, looking at the board. Sona, so you don't mind if I ask a few questions? Deku, make yourself comfortable, he replied calmly. Sona, why did you enroll in that particular school? She asked curiously. Deku was an immensely famous singer all over the world, as well as being considered one of the richest people in the world. Someone like him could enroll in any school or university in the world, and his grades were perfect too. Deku, well, I was tired of fame and everything that comes with it, and that's why I decided to go back to school. I chose Kuoh because I had visited this city before, and it brings me good memories. I hope you understand me, said he, moving his piece on the board. Sona nodded, for she understood a little. Sona, in his notes it was also that he traveled a lot, countries like Spain, United States, Switzerland, Iceland, Germany, Greece, England and others, and that he was recently in Brazil. Why travel so much? Even more so after you left the music business, he said while playing. Deku, well, I've always liked to travel. Mainly I like to go to Brazil because of the delicious food made there, he replied calmly. Sona, well, I think that's it, checkmate. She prepared to win the game only to widen her eyes when she looked at the board. His king was totally surrounded by Deku's pieces, with no chance of winning. Sona, how? I totally predicted your moves, she said, perplexed. Deku, yes, you did, but you were so focused on predicting my every move. It was simple to lead you into a trap, he said, smiling. Sona stared at him in bewilderment at how Deku had lured her into a trap. This was not the thinking of someone who played chess, it was the thinking of someone who fought and lived on the battlefield. Sona, who are you? She asked with shocked eyes. Deku, I'm Izuku Midoriya, he said calmly. Sona just examined her face, seeing that she was really telling the truth. Deku, take a picture, Kaisho, it will last longer. Sona blushed at the comment, and then looked back at the chessboard. Sona, he's the only man who beat me in a game of chess. I even turned down my ex-fiancée for not being able to beat me. Sona looked once more at Deku, who smiled at her. It made Sona feel her heart race. Deku, well, if that's all, I think I should go, he said, getting up and getting away from Sona. Sona, but before that I'd like to ask you something, she spoke, gaining the attention of Deku, who turned to her. Sona opened the drawer beside her and took out a cover of a record. She held him close to Deku's gaze as his face turned red. Deku, can you give me an autograph? She asked shyly. Tsubaki, who was next to him, also blushed and picked up a disc similar to Sona's. Tsubaki, for me too, she said nervously. Deku smiled and took the 2 discs, signed, and handed them back. Sona/Tsubaki, thank you, they said when they received their objects. Deku, I should be grateful for having two fans like you, he said, smiling and waving to the two, making them blush. Deku, I will go. He received a nod from Sona and walked out of the room. Sighing a little, Sona leaned back in her chair. When she found out that Izuku Midoriya was going to move to her school, she couldn't contain her surprise. After all, he was someone who could study in the best schools in the world, even more so for his grades. With questions from her, Sona understood a little of Deku's personality, and even considered him to be a really normal person. But something in the back of her mind was telling her that Deku was anything but normal. Using some magic, Sona tried to hack into Deku's mind to see who he really was. And that wasn't a pleasant experience, rather a very frightening one she's ever had. When Sona had used her magic to enter Deku's mind, what she could see was only what Deku allowed. Sona had seen an immense black abyss. She didn't know what it was, but that astonishing amount of power that was everywhere was overwhelming and frightening. Even evil, Sona had never seen such a large amount of intent for chaos and destruction. When she faced that black abyss, he stared back at her. Something so big that it made her feel like an insignificant, laughable being. Whatever it was, she was asleep, as if she was waiting for the moment to wake up. Even the power of her sister, Seraphal Leviathan, was completely insignificant compared to that. She only had one way to describe. Pure, massive, destructive power, ready to awaken and be used for nothing more than just chaos and destruction. Sona sighed as she remembered that, the most terrifying thing she had ever seen. Sona can't help but think about putting him in her nobility, not only for his power but also for being his fan. Luckily for her, Rias hadn't paid attention to him yet, as she was interested in a boy named Issei Hayato, one of the ones that causes Sona the most problems. But Sona hoped that Rias wouldn't try anything stupid against Deku, as she didn't want to see that wake up. Sona, I just wanted a normal day, she said, sad, almost crying. With Deku. He was looking at the schedule he received from Sona with the class schedules. Deku walked a little further and faced the door to his room. He walked into the room, ignoring the shocked looks from all the girls, sitting by the window. Deku closed his eyes and was quiet, while all the girls watched him. But his concentration was broken by a scream. Kaya! Deku looked out of the corner of his eye to see who it was. Then he saw two girls walk through at the classroom door. The first was a beautiful young woman with white skin, blue eyes inherited from her father, and a devious figure. Long red hair that she also inherited from her father, which already reached down to her thighs with a single strand of hair sticking out of the top. Her hair also has loose bangs covering the rest, and side bangs framing her face. The second girl was a beautiful young woman, with a voluptuous figure, very long black hair and violet eyes. Her hair is usually tied in a long ponytail reaching down to her legs with two strands coming out of the top sloping back, with an orange ribbon holding it in place. Again, Deku can't help but feel very disappointed in Akino and Rias' power. He already knew that the two of them weren't very strong, but this is really disappointing, especially Rias. Rias' aura was like a small red aura of power of destruction, but it was something extremely insignificant. Akino's was an electric yellow tone, because she was adept at elemental magic, mainly lightning, and also had a small amount of light, probably on her fallen angel side. Deku was without the mask, due to a request from Sona. Rias and Akino, when they noticed him, were shocked by his beauty. Deku in turn only looked away, making Akino and Rias in shock. They both went to their seats, and soon after Sona and Tsubaki entered the room. Shortly after that, the teacher entered the room and noticed Deku and asked him to introduce himself. Deku went to the board and wrote his name. Deku, my name is Izuku Midoriya. I was born here in Japan, but I've been traveling abroad these years. I like to read and be quiet and practice arts. There's nothing I really don't like, said he. Introduced himself. Deku, but I ask you to call me Deku. The girls turned when they looked at him. Do you have any questions for him? Questioned the teacher when everyone raised their hands except the demons. Are you really the singer Izuku Midoriya? She asked, getting a nod from Deku, making all the others scream with joy. Do you have a girlfriend? Deku, have, but they're not here. He thought with a mischievous smile. Deku, no, I don't have a girlfriend. He said, making all the girls vibrate. Did you come here to steal our girls? Asked one of the boys. The girls glared at him furious. Deku smiled at that and sensually said, Deku, will it be? Only if they want. He licked his lips, sensually causing a turmoil in the hearts of all the women who blushed furiously, while the boys got angry. After a few questions, Deku headed to his seat and spent the rest of the class there. For him, who was considered a genius among geniuses, it didn't even make sense for him to open his notebook, since his mind copied everything perfectly. After that, the signal rang for the second period. Looking to the side, he saw Kendo and Rias coming towards him. Deku sighed at that, as he was about to start the troubles. Rias, Deku-kun, my name is Rias Gremory, nice to meet you, she said with a big smile. Deku, it's nice to meet you, Gremory-san, he said, looking into Rias' eyes, making her get lost in his black and red eyes. Rias, got it, please call me Rias, and this is my friend Akino Himejima, she said, introducing Akino to Deku. Deku was kind of in disbelief as he could feel the lust coming from Akino in waves. Akino, fufufu, you can call me Akino, Deku-kun, she said in a malicious tone, surprising Rias. Akino, I'd like you in my. Before she could finish speaking, Rias put her hand in front of her friend's mouth. Laughing nervously, Rias spoke again. Rias, well, just to let you know that anything you need can ask us. Deku waved a smile, making Rias and Akino blush. The two withdrew. Seeing this, Deku smiled and released some of his aura, sensing a shift in the demons. Streets now emanated a greater aura of greed. Akino continued with lust in full swing. Even Sona had a little greed coming out along with her lust. Tsubaki exuded lust, but she was the smallest of the three. Some time later, after a while of class, the bell had rung. Deku left for the break, walking around the school to meet, and ended up stopping in front of a large Kendo club dojo. Looking back, he saw some girls with shinace in their hands and practicing Kendo. Deku, excuse me. He stood at the door watching the girls. When they saw Deku standing at the door of the club, they all instantly stopped and went to him. Two girls took the lead. One girl had shoulder-length pink hair and a white headband, and the other has long brown hair tied in a ponytail with a red ribbon. The one with the pink hair approached. Are you really Izuku Midoriya? She asked while blushing. Deku, yes, and you are? I'm Keitase. I'm Murayama. Deku, nice to meet you, pretty young ladies. I'm Izuku, but you can call me Deku, he said, making them both blush for being called pretty. Keitase, do you like Kendo? Would you like to join our club? She asked while blushed and hope in her eyes. Deku, of course, why not? I can't let this go, said a voice next door. They all turned their gaze to whoever was talking, and they went when they saw the boy. He was a handsome young man with short blonde hair, blue eyes, and a wart under his left eye. Although he was handsome, he did not possess a beauty that could surpass Deku's, as the latter enchanted even the most beautiful goddesses, the coldest. Kiba, I couldn't help but overhear. Deku-senpai, would you like a duel? He said, surprising everyone. Deku, and who would you be? Making Kiba blush a little for not introducing himself. Kiba, I'm sorry about that, my name is Kiba Yudo, so do you accept? He said, smiling. Deku rolled his eyes and turned around. Deku, come on, what are you waiting for? Kiba smiled at Deku's answer. Kiba, excellent. He looked at the Kendo club girls who froze. League, girls, sorry to interrupt, but Deku-senpai and I will need to adapt your dojo and equipment a bit. Keitase, Kiba-kun, Deku-senpai CC, of course, please go ahead, she said, nervously stuttering a lot. Deku and Kiba waved and each one went to the corner, where they had like shinais kept and each of them took one. Deku and Kiba placed themselves on the club's field and distanced themselves. Kiba positioned himself forward from two smart stances. He had his left kendo stance a little closer, and the weapons were in front of his orientation to the center quest line. As for Deku, if it needed a type of technique that didn't look like any skill, it could be used as a technique that could be used. Deku was nicknamed the Invincible Warlord, nicknamed by the Hindu faction itself. Deku almost never got into a battle because of his dragons, but when he got into a fight, but could be sure, it would be a one-sided massacre. Deku had earned the title of the world's strongest fighter because he possessed proficiency with any weapon he wanted. Shiva himself nicknamed him that after seeing his control and handling over weapons. His arts with the sword, spear, dagger, hammer, axe or any other weapon were magnificent to behold. When he trained, the Hindu gods even stopped to watch his training. Kiba frowned a little when he saw Deku's posture as it appeared to be wide open. Kiba quickly charged Deku at a speed slightly faster than a human, but nothing extraordinary, and raised his sword with the intention of hitting Deku. However, Deku quickly raised his left leg and stepped on the ground a little ahead just where Kiba would step to balance, thus making the reincarnated demon lose his battle stance and have the only way to attack Deku. When Kiba's sword would color with Deku, Deku raised his sword and defended Kiba's and in a quick movement, made Kiba's sword slide making him lose his balance falling a little forward. Before Kiba could balance, Deku slammed his shurnai into the back of Kiba's knee, causing the boy to bend over before hitting Kiba's hand, forcing him to release his shurnai. Deku placed his shurnai on Kiba's neck, thus ending the fight. "Deku, looks like I won," he said calmly. The entire Kendo club was silent as they watched Kiba, who was considered the best fighter in the club, lose in just 3 strikes. Kiba is also perplexed at how easily he lost to a human. Kiba knew that Deku hadn't used strength and speed above humans, but rather that Deku's sword skill was much better than his. Of course Kiba was holding back, but he still couldn't believe it. Kiba turned his attention to Deku. "Kiba, yes, but next time I'll win." Deku helped him up. Deku almost smiled. It was impossible for Kiba to overtake him. He trained with Rimuru, Tanjiro, Sung and Subaru. What chance would he lose to someone as inferior as Kiba? Good, but it was still fun watching someone try to outdo the other. "Deku, I'll be waiting for that," he said with a smile. The girls who were watching the two act so friendly couldn't help but blush as perverted thoughts circled their minds focusing on the 2 men ahead. Later, the class continued normally from then on. The demons never tried to approach Deku, but watched him from afar. Rias had her focus on Issei as she tried and found out he had a sacred gear. After classes ended, Deku returned to his house feeling some magical signatures following him, and they belonged to Tsubaki, Kaneko, and even a bat that was Rias familiar. When he got home, he took off his uniform and went to prepare something to eat. Demon's movement. With Rias. She was playing chess with her friend Sona. "Sona, so you made him part of your nobility, right?" Rias: "Yes, it was easy to convince him." Sona just sighed. The two were talking about Issei. Rias had already placed him in her nobility thanks to the fallen angel who killed him. At first reluctant, but upon learning that she could form a harem, Yeli immediately accepted. "Rias, so what about him, huh?" she asked looking at Deku, who was walking home. Sona: "Yes, his name is Izuku Midoriya, but for sure you already know, he has a strong magical aura, strong enough to know that something is wrong with us, very skilled in everything he does, being considered the best, participates in everything who the school programs and also surprisingly beat Kiba in a duel. Has grades high enough to become the school's #1. She said looking at Deku through the window. Turning her gaze to Rias, Sona straightened her glasses. "Sona, what did Kaneko feel?" Rias grimaced at Sona's question. "Rias, she told me that Deku's aura is extremely evil and destructive, almost driving her crazy to see it. A huge black hole that devours everything," she said, remembering Kaneko's expression. It made her feel resentful. "Sona, But back to Issei, has he managed to awaken the holy gear yet? Rias sighed and looked at the chessboard, playing a piece. Rias, yes, it's been a few months since he joined my nobility. Sona moved a piece and drank the tea. Sona, what would your sacred gear be? Rias, boosted gear. Sona widened her eyes minimally. Though surprised that Rias has a Longinus, and not just any, but one that carries the soul of one of the celestial dragons, Drake the Welsh dragon. Sona, from the look on your face, Drake must have said something about Deku, right? Rias cracked a small smile. Rias, yes, Drake already told me about him. Sona is now curious, because for Drake, one of the celestial dragons, to say something about someone, either this person is strong or has great relevance. Sona, what did he say? She asked in a curious tone. Rias, Drake told me so that I would not, under any circumstances, piss off Deku. Sona looked into Rias' eyes and remembered. Since the day she looked at Deku's aura, that oppression she felt was no lie. Rias, he told me it was the aura of a dragon as strong as he and Albion. Sona couldn't hide her surprise now, a dragon that is as strong as Drake and Albion? It was pretty hard to believe. They both looked at each other and were silent for a few moments, until Sona spoke again. Sona, I want him, she said bluntly, making Rias pale. Sona, he's a good person for my date and the student council. He's smart enough to participate, and we can clearly use a boy. His reputation would be really helpful, and I still have a few pieces I could use for him, she told Rias before sighing. Sona, the only reason I didn't recruit you is your Rias. For if Deku contained this hidden talent, he would be good for his peer against Riser. Only silence was Rias' answers to that. In fact, she knew how interested Sona was in Deku. Rias wasn't the first to set eyes on the boy. Deku was quite smart, and also often helped the other students, sometimes even repairing old school equipment, saving the school the cost of hiring a technician. Sona had planned on recruiting Deku in a few months, because she still wanted to keep watching him for a little longer and getting to know him better. Originally, her plan was to recruit him this month, but she didn't because of Rias. There were reports that her engagement to Riser was being accelerated somehow. Rias, of course, was angry and demanded to know why, but her father hadn't told her, and her older brother was also the same. So Rias asked Sona to give her a chance to recruit Deku, even though she already has Issei who had a Longinus in her hands. Sona, of course, wasn't happy at all. She had been after Deku for over a month, and the only reason she hadn't invited him earlier was because she wanted to watch him grow. In a way, she was Sona, a farmer who slowly and carefully cultivated his crops, and just when she was ready to harvest them, someone came along and tried to harvest. If it had been someone else, Sona would have fought for Deku. Oh yes, she would have fought it. However, Rias was her friend, her best friend since they were kids and they had grown up together, and for that she was willing to give him a chance for Rias to recruit Deku. However, if she failed, that would be it. There wouldn't be another chance for her. Rias, thank you, she said, looking at Sona. Sona, although I was wondering how you're going to recruit him. Rias cringed a little. She knew Sona wouldn't approve of her methods, even more so after the warnings she got from Drake. Rias, you know the fallen angel that killed Issei? Sona, yeah, I know. Sona stopped to think for a while. Sona, you're not going to tell me that. Rias, yeah, we'll let her kill him. Signal's eyes widened as her blood ran cold, as she couldn't believe her friend would do this again. Sona, what are you thinking? Rias, didn't you hear what the Welsh dragon said? She angrily yelled at the selfish way Rias would try to place Deku in his nobility. Rias simply said that she was willing to pay the price of a human life if it meant having another member of her nobility free her from her marriage. What she didn't realize was that she wasn't the one paying the price. She was someone else. But the scariest thing for Sona was that Rias saw this as a true burden of being forced to choose. Rias didn't see anything she was doing as wrong. Sona knew that this wasn't just Rias' problem, but all pure blood demons. They saw themselves so far above humanity that they found nothing wrong with playing God with their lives. just seeing how much reincarnated demons are treated. They believed that their power made them superior to everyone else. What they didn't realize was that this power was given to them by mere chance, that nothing they did to deserve it or the apparent superiority that came with it. Everything Rias had was given to her. Her power of destruction, her rank as heiress, and even the privilege of starting a peer, were all given to her. But even so, she felt pride, a confidence that shouldn't have been present in her so-called accomplishments. However, Sona couldn't complain too much as she herself was a golden-blooded devil, but even then she never manipulated anyone's life. If she wanted someone in her nobility, she would simply offer him this place, never playing with his life. But Rias was so blind to getting out of her arranged marriage that she even came to play with Issei's life. Something that would go against all of Sona's principles. Rias, not the other option. Drake has already felt the aura of a dragon on Deku. Sona sighed. She knew perfectly well that a dragon that would, in theory, be as strong as Drake and Albion would never bow to Rias or accept her as a master, except for Issei, of course, since he is a pervert. Deku was someone the demons watched since he entered Kuoh Academy. He was a kind, polite, and respectful person, showing a rather sadistic side at times, but even he was perfect. He had also become close with Sona, Tsubaki, Kiba, Kaneko, and Akino. Sona always played chess with him and Tsubaki was with him, so they both ended up becoming friends, as Deku saw more than Sona's stoic face. With Kiba it was due to their rivalry, where since he lost, the reincarnated demon started to always train with Deku to improve his skills. Kaneko was the girl who started watching Deku at Rias' request, and surprisingly, they ended up becoming friends. Deku had the ability to understand the way Kaneko always wanted to say it, plus Kaneko, after she tasted Deku's food, started to always eat with him. Kaneko had even started to sit on Deku's lap and was always with him. With Akino it was more because of her uncontrollable lust, since whenever Akino found him she tried to take him to bed. So for Rias the easiest plan would be to let Deku die, and then save him and earn his loyalty. Well, at least that's what she thought would happen. Rias was sure that even if the time came when Deku found out about her plans, Rias was confident that her love for his nobility would prevent anything from happening. Sona put her hand on her forehead. Sona, I see. Do you already have any idea which sacred gear he has? Or is he really a dragon himself? Rias, the possibility of being a sacred gear has already been ruled out by me. Sona raised an eyebrow. When she was about to ask, she remembered that there were few sacred gears that had the soul of a dragon sealed inside. She could already discard Albion, as Drake didn't mention anything regarding the white dragon of supremacy. I just said that Deku had the aura of a dragon as powerful as they were. There was only one answer. Deku was a dragon through and through, a dragon they had never heard of. There have been rumors that Hakuryuku is currently with Grigori. Sona felt this would be a big headache. A dragon was considered the pinnacle of power. Sona, just don't let your admiration for him blind you, she said, joking. Rias immediately blushed at this, as she had been a huge fan of Izuku since her brother had taken her to a concert. Rias had posters and CDs of Deku inside her other various things in her room. Rias, I won't, she said, embarrassed. Sona laughed, although she couldn't say much as she was also a huge fan of Deku. Sona, very well Rias, I hope this works out. You don't want the same thing to happen that happened in Valentine, right? Rias shook her head. Rias, I must, she said firmly as she faced Deku. Rias, for the sake of my dream, I must, she muttered, squeezing her hand. With Deku. It had been several months since he started attending Kuoh Academy. Deku was considered one of the princes of the schools along with Kiba due to the fact that both were always together or with Kaneko. He had a friendship with Sona and Tsubaki due to them always talking and playing chess. Deku interacted with Rias and Akino, although the latter always tried to take him to bed. Currently, the sun was setting, causing the sky to acquire a brilliant golden color. He was standing on a bridge, and in front of him was a blushing and embarrassed teenager. Her straight obsidian hair cascaded over her shoulders as she bent over. When Deku didn't respond, she looked up, revealing a pair of violet eyes. She stuttered. Her arms were straight, gripping her delegated hips. My name is Yuma Amando. I love you, Deku. Deku didn't even look at her. He was looking at the horizon. Yuma, please go out with me. She lowered her head again, waiting for Deku's answer. Her words sounded so genuine. The tremor in her voice, the shrill tone in which she spoke, all these qualities made her look incredibly cute and adorable. Deku would decline the request, but politely. Deku, I'm sorry, but I'm already dating. Yuma looked sad and again, in a shaky tone, she asked. Yuma, so please grant me the chance to go out with you. Deku looked at her more, and seeing that she was a fallen angel, he smiled. An amused smile. Deku, sure, let's go out, Yuma. Unexpected visit. Yuma, Deku, you're early. She said, surprise. Deku looked at his watch and looked at her. Deku, don't worry, I just arrived. Really, he just arrived. Deku would be late on top of that. But luckily, thanks to time manipulation, he managed to arrive. Yuma, there's a store that recently opened. We can go together? Deku found himself looking at her current outfit. Yuma was wearing a school uniform. The dark red color of her jacket contrasted well with the pale skin of her slender neck and fingers, and the skirt was high enough to be suggestive but low enough to preserve an air of innocence. Deku shrugged without caring, although it was kind of weird for someone to go out on a date in school clothes. Deku, sure, will you let me pick something for you? He gave a fake smile, but she didn't notice. Yuma's face turned red as she nodded shyly. Deku held her hand and started pulling her towards the store. He was sacrificing valuable time, he had to take advantage of it. When they were at the clothing store, Deku allowed Yuma to model various outfits for him. In the end, he chose a pure black sundress for her and bought it. On the way out of the store, he found Yuma looking at a bracelet. It was a simple thing, with a few gems set in a golden band. Without telling her, Deku went ahead and bought the thing. As the two sat down to have lunch at a restaurant, Deku presented his gift to her. When Yuma finished with her request, Deku took her wrist and gently wrapped it around her. There was a brief moment when Yuma seemed to cringe, but relaxed instantly and realized the present. Yuma was amazed by the bracelet. Yuma, you didn't have to. Deku, all right, it's to celebrate our first date. Hopefully it won't be our last. Deku said that with a smile and couldn't help but watch Yuma's reaction. Her slight hesitation when I told him it was the first of many didn't go unnoticed. Deku, also, I bought it because it seemed to suit you. He said, pretending to be embarrassed. Yuma, thank you so much, I saw them around. To be honest, I just like the colors on this one. Deku, oh, do you really have it? In all my years of life, I have yet to see a single person with a cross on their bracelet. He suppressed his smile. Deku, about that Yuma, are you religious or something? She was silent. Deku minimally narrowed his eyes at her questioning. Yuma, not much. I used to be Catholic, but now I'm not religious. Is that you? Deku, me? He said the first thing that came to his mind. Deku, well, I don't have any religion, but my aunt used to be a shrine priestess, so I was raised strictly in a strange mix of Shinto and Buddhist traditions. He said, bored. This date was already taking too long and becoming more and more a pain in the ass. Deku, but I never thought about not being religious. Was it strange to go from Catholic to non-religious? He said in a curious tone, giving the impression that he was just trying to be a good conversationalist. From what she could tell, Yuma didn't think he was suspicious, but he just asked a very personal question. Deku, I'm sorry, that was a little rude of me. If it's something very personal, then… Yuma, no, it's okay. She said, interrupting him. Yuma, I just have to think about it for a second. Deku almost burst out laughing. He didn't know if this fallen angel was really dumb or just stupid. His order arrived accompanied by Yuma's. Yuma started eating her chocolate parfait slowly. Yuma, I think I was disappointed, she said suddenly, snapping Deku out of his reverie. Yuma, Being Catholic was fine and all, but there were too many rules. And I couldn't keep up with them all. Deku started eating his sandwich. Yuma, I felt out of place among all those devout Catholics. I didn't like the feeling, Deku. She addressed him directly, resting her chin in her hands. Yuma, the feeling of how much someone from above tells you that you shouldn't be like this or that person, as they are better people than you. Deku, I see. He said disinterestedly, but Yuma didn't notice. Deku turned his gaze to the chocolate parfait. Deku, so this cuttlefish parfait is good? Yuma, want some? Scene change. Deku, I liked your name. Yuma means sunset, correct? He mentioned without ceremony. She looked surprised by his question, but Yuma recovered and nodded quickly. Yuma, it's a cute name. Deku looked at the horizon watching a boat pass. Then he saw that he was inside a soundproof zone. Very slowly, Yuma brought her head closer to his. Yuma took a deep breath as if deciding something. Yuma, Deku, there's something I want to do to celebrate our first day. Can you hear my wish? Deku gave a big smirk in his mind. Deku, finally she will reveal herself. Deku, sure, and what's serious? Yuma, you. She hesitated for a second. Yuma, would you die for me? Deku, I'm sorry? I did not hear you. He feigned ignorance. Yuma looked confused. Yuma too said. She cleared her throat. Yuma, would you die for me? Her voice sounded menacing. Deku, of course. An ugly expression appeared on Yuma's face. She backed away, chuckling softly. Suddenly, 2 black feathered wings exploded from her back, revealing her true form. Along with that, her black sundress was ripped to shreds and replaced with something else. Her clothes have become very revealing. Yuma, now die human. She created a spear of light and shot it towards Deku. Deku just smiled seeing the spear coming towards her, which surprised Yuma/Rainer. Deku took the spear with his hand. Deku, pathetic, do you really think something this low would hurt me? Deku's aura began to appear. Something resembling a dragon was seen coming out of his aura. Yuma's body started to shudder as she felt that aura. It was none other than the king of the mad dragons, the king of destruction. Someone who had simply destroyed 1/3 of Grigori just for pissing him off. If it weren't for Shiva's appearance, it was quite likely that Grigori wouldn't even exist anymore. And she was one of the fallen angels who came close to death seeing those immense dragons devouring the bodies of her other companions. It was a terrifying sight that she will never forget, the presence of that monster she finally remembered. Yuma widened his eyes as a shiver ran down his spine, the fear uncontrollable. Deku looked at her and smiled. Deku, get out of here soon before the same thing happens to your other companions. Yuma got scared and tried to run away. Deku, don't think you'll get away with it. He threw the spear of light at Yuma, piercing her arm. Yuma screamed in pain, but her fear was greater. Deku, now for the final touch. He cut off arm causing blood to spill. Soon his arm regenerated. Deku, it's bad that I don't have that body made of flames, but this one I have intolerance to pain. He said looking at arm that he just ripped off. Red flames began to leave his hand and burn his severed arm. Deku looked at the sky and started to walk calmly back to his house. A short time later, Rias Gremory would arrive at the scene and be perplexed to see a pool of blood on the floor. Some time later, with Deku. Deku was walking calmly towards his house, and when he got there he opened the door and turned on the lights. You came back. A voice said in the background, a voice so emotionless that anyone would doubt it was human. Deku turned his gaze to the being who was sitting on his couch without even being shaken. The person sitting on his couch was a beautiful young girl with long black hair down to her hips. Her ears differ from those of a normal human in that they have pointed tips, though her long black hair makes these features difficult to notice. His dark gray eyes have reptilian slit pupils. Her costume was basically a black gothic loli. Deku, what do you want, Ophis? He said in a tone that matched Ophis's. The being standing in front of Deku was none other than Ophis, the dragon god of infinity and one of the ultimate existences in the world, along with Deku, Great Red, and Trihexa 666. The Ouroboros dragon made its appearance before the demon of destruction. And what could happen from the meeting of these two powers capable of breaking the balance of the world? Dragon god of infinity. A silence pervades the living room of Deku's house, when not a single sim, not even noises or breath sounds could be heard. If a normal person, even a supernatural being, saw what was in front of him, he would be confused, that's all. On one side of the room was Deku with his blank gaze towards the girl in front of him who had an equally blank and emotionless gaze. For anyone, this would be an unusual situation, but nothing unusual. But everything would change if someone of the name of the being who was in front of Deku. Ophis. The dragon god of infinity, the Ouroboros dragon, born in the dimensional rift, a dragon with a power superior to all others with power considered infinite, and only made a mention of his name all other factions of the world trembled. The leader of the Kuoh's brigade, a faction with several beings from the most different terrorist mythologies, from demons to gods. And in front of Ophis was Deku, the king of the mad dragons, the right hand of the god of destruction, Shiva, the strongest existence, surpassing the Great Red and the Trihexa in power and strength. Anyone will know the true identity of, and if they saw them in a room face to face, one would expect the catastrophic battle, where at the very least all of Japan would be destroyed. And for the people who expected it, they would be immensely surprised at what they saw. Deku's emotionless face fell as his eyes seemed to gain emotions again, and a small smile appeared on his face. Deku, it's been a while, Ophis. He spoke in a tone you wouldn't speak to a stranger, let alone a friend. It was the tone you used with a longtime friend, with an acquaintance. Ophis, indeed, my friend. She said in a tone that seemed to have a little more emotion than the previous one, even more calling Deku a friend. What few knew was that, in fact, Ophis and Deku had known each other for some time. Ophis was the leader of the Kuoh's brigade, an organized terrorist that sought to drive Great Red from the dimensional rift, the home of Ophis, so the Infinity Dragon would need powerful allies. Obviously, for someone who was looking for powerful allies like her, an existence like Deku wouldn't be hidden for long. A few years ago, Ophis had met Deku while he was traveling through Russia. Ophis easily found him, as even with all the containment seals, Deku's chaotic aura wouldn't be so easily suppressed. Ophis sought him out because she found out that Deku had defeated the Great Red and placed him under her wing. They both had a brief conversation and Ophis ordered Deku to take Great Red out of the dimensional rift. But this order didn't go down very well for her, as the dragons that followed Deku almost killed her because of being as insignificant as she was, ordering the king to do something. But Deku prevented that from happening and saved Ophis, politely declining her request. Even knowing the differences in power, Ophis didn't accept the refusal, so deliberately, she fought Deku. Well, calling it a fight would be a joke, as it was a totally one-sided fight. Deku defeated Ophis just by moving his hand, as he did with Great Red in the battle he had when he was 7 years old. In the battle he had against Shiva, just the movement of his hand caused the destruction of half of the galaxy, but soon he rebuilt it. Against the Great Red, his hand movement has already generated more destruction, destroying and affecting the entire universe. But for Deku, who thought he would never see Ophis again after the battle, he was surprised when a few weeks later he met the dragon god of infinity again. This time, Ophis didn't want to fight, but to know why Deku served Shiva, after all the king of mad dragons, were immensely stronger. Deku simply ignored her and continued on with his life, and surprisingly, Ophis followed him for a while, as he found Deku amusing. Ophis was innocent as a child and always went after things that caught her interest, like Deku. Deku had grown used to Ophis' presence and had even taught her a few things about the world. Ophis was like a sponge that absorbed everything they taught her. With that, Deku started to read and perfectly identify Ophis' feelings just by looking at her. Another reason Ophis followed Deku was usually because of the silence, because she felt this calm when she was with him, and mainly because Ophis was a sweet tooth and totally loved Deku's food. because she herself proclaimed herself as a friend of Deku who came in the course of her having seen an anime and liked and found the power of friendship that strengthened people out of nowhere. She called herself Deku's best friend, always enjoying throwing it in anyone's face. Ophis being too greedy for Deku's food, never allowing anyone else to eat but her, and too proud to be his best friend, and trying to find something she would be better than Deku, only to fail miserably. Deku, so what are you doing here? Did something happen? He asked calmly as he headed for the kitchen. Ophis, no, I like being here. Kuoh's brigade is very noisy. I desire silence. Remind me you said you would come to this town. I also want to have fun, she said in a monotone. Deku came back from the kitchen as he had listened carefully, and in his hand was a plate of homemade cookies and a glass of milk. Deku, got it, here's your candy, he said as he placed the plate and glass in front of Ophis, who had her eyes light up momentarily. Whenever Deku made sweets at his house, Ophis loved them all. There was even a place in the kitchen made just to keep Ophis sweets. Ophis, I appreciate it, she said calmly, starting to quickly eat the cookies. Deku, I have the impression that not is just that. He spoke, causing Ophis to momentarily stop. Ophis, I want to know when you will exterminate that despicable, terrible, vulgar, hopeless, ugly and miserable existence of all dragon races. Deku sweated from Ophis's venomous but emotionless insults in the Great Red. Deku, Ophis, you're getting off topic. Ophis, did I? She said, confused. Deku put his hand on his forehead and started massaging. Deku, don't think too much about the small details. We're friends, right? He said as a smile graced his face. Ophis, really? She said with a small smile. Deku nodded his head. Deku, but killing the Great Red is out of the question, you hear? Ophis immediately pouted. Actually, her expression hadn't changed, but for Deku, who could read her emotions like a book, he knew she was pouting. Ophis, then I must follow him until you help me skin him alive. Deku, Runf, make yourself comfortable. He laughed a little. Sighing, Deku turned his attention to Ophis. Deku, I have no problem with you staying here. But Ophis, you cannot leave this house without me, is that clear? He asked calmly. The last thing he needed was to alert the three factions that not only he, but also Ophis was in Kuoh, in addition to the rest of the world. And technically Ophis was a terrorist decided to be the head of the Kuoh's brigade. Ophis nodded his head. Ophis, I understand. She went back to eating. Deku sighed because he would now have even more headache. Ophis, I want to watch Dragon Ball. Deku, who was stuck in his thoughts, turned his attention to Ophis, who wanted to watch anime. Yes, Ophis the Ouroboros dragon, one of the strongest beings in the world, was otaku. It had happened once. Ophis had heard about anime while she was at the Kuoh's brigade, and when she went to Deku's house she wanted to watch it. Deku, although he thought it was strange, didn't care much and put anime for her to watch. Let's say that after that day Ophis became addicted to anime as much as food. The worst thing was that Ophis didn't know how to differentiate the real from the imaginary. He started to laugh when he remembered that after Ophis watched Fairy Tail, she wanted help finding Acnologia to get the Black Dragon to join the Kuoh's brigade. It took a week to get her to give up on the idea. Deku, and what is Dragon Ball? He asked, who, although he knew, he was curious to know how Ophis distorted this anime in his mind. Ophis, Dragon Ball is about a dragon with magical powers and a few other people I don't care about. He can grant wishes. I personally didn't know about this mystical dragon until I watched the series after hearing about it on Kuoh's brigade. I would put him on a level close to or equal to a dragon king, but not as strong as Tiamat. However, this desire to bestow power is something I want. If I had known sooner, I would have recruited him into the Kuoh's brigade. Shinran is the name of the dragon that grants wishes. My wish would be to destroy Great Red. That's why I have to gather the Dragon Balls and watch Dragon Ball so I get an idea of its true power. Deku, you have to help me find the Dragon Balls. 7 came out in total, she calmly explained. Deku was perplexed as Ophis had taken it to another level. She didn't even touch that she had said she wanted to watch Dragon Ball, but she also wants to join them. Then, provocatively, he said, Deku, yeah, looks like you haven't gotten to the best part yet. He said, gaining Ophis' attention. Ophis, what part? She asked, curious. Deku, in the part where Super Shenron appears. Ophis didn't know what this, Super Shenron, meant. Deku noticed this and said, Deku, the Super Shenron is a gigantic dragon that has the length of several galaxies together. He is insanely stronger than you and the Great Red, and can grant any wish you want, from destroying universes, etc. Deku could see that Ophis widened her eyes a little. Ophis, then I'll look for him. She said, I have now the Super Shenron as a goal. Deku, however, he wouldn't be able to talk to you and neither would you be able to talk to him, since Super Shenron only knows divine language. Ophis looked a little thoughtful. Deku, but there is a being a little stronger than Super Shenron, and that has a personality very similar to yours, but more fun and cheerful. Ophis, hoo. She waved her arms like a child. Deku Zeo, the king of everything, is the lord of the 12 universes of Dragon Ball. It is said that he could destroy the universes he created just by blinking. Ophis' eyes gleamed minimally. Ophis seemed to get excited and went back to watching Dragon Ball. Deku almost laughed because of that. A nun? A ransom. Scene change. A few days later. 2 days have passed since Ophis arrived at Deku's house. Everything was still as calm as ever. The only difference was that Deku needed to maintain Ophis' almost infinite hunger that she was eating at all times. Deku was taking advantage of the fact that Rias had thought he had died, due to having found a pool of blood in the park, to stay at home these days just sleeping. With Issei. He was just waking up. Issei, sighs, I screwed up last night, he said weakly. So he dressed to go to school. On the way to school. Issei, I hope the president isn't mad at me yet. He was so distracted he didn't even notice using it if he bumped into someone. Hi you? He turned his attention to the voice, and when he saw its face it immediately changed to a perverted one. He had a nun face down on the floor showing her panties. Why did I fall? Issei, who is this? The nun looked at him, and he looked at her. But soon her expression was happy again. Issei, a blonde girl in shiny white panties, how rare, that's great. He shouted happily in his thoughts. Issei, wait, what am I doing? He ran to help the fallen nun. Issei, why are you okay? He reached out his hand to use so she could get up. Thank you very much. She was getting ready to get up, but at that moment the veil flew away because of the wind. Her blonde hair, which was covered by it, fell over her shoulders. It was blonde and smooth that glistened in the sun. She was a beautiful young woman with long blonde hair and green eyes. Her hair flows down to her back, with bangs parted across her forehead and a single strand sticking out of the top and falling back. Issei, how cute. Be well. Issei noticed and soon pulled his hand. Issei, sorry. The veil that was lying on the ground started to fly again because of the wind. Issei, oops. He ran towards the veil and caught it with a happy face. Issei, that's my ideal girl. He handed the veil to the girl. Issei, version, blonde beauty. Thank you very much. Issei, oh, it was nothing. I need to keep talking somehow. Well, a subject. Issei, what a nice weather today. Do I look like an old neighbor? Well, looks like I got lost, she said, putting her fingers together shamefully. A few minutes of conversation later. Issei, I see, so you were transferred here. Asia, yeah, I've been in trouble since I got here. I don't speak Japanese very well. I was lost and other people didn't understand what I was saying, she said, while smiling sadly. At that they heard a cry and Asia ran to see. Issei, excuse me. Asia saw a boy lying on the floor crying. Asia, if you're a boy you shouldn't cry over a scratch like that. She stroked the boy's head. A green light came out of her hands and started to heal the boy. Issei ate his wound. At this he felt discomfort in his left hand. Issei, huh? Just now my left hand. Asia, smiling there, your wound is healed. It's completely fine now. Then she looked at Issei. Asia, I'm sorry. I helped him out of instinct. They continued to talk about the powers she just used. Until she saw a convent far away. Asia, oh, that's the place. Issei, if you're talking about a convent in this city, this is the only one around here. Asia, thank God you really saved me. Issei felt something bad coming from there. Issei, but I never saw anyone there. Asia, I want to thank you. Could you accompany me? Issei, oh no thanks, I have some things to do. Asia, sad really? My name is Asia Argento. Please call me Asia. Issei, I'm Hayata Issei, but you could call me Issei. Asia, Issei, I'm glad to have met someone as kind as you as soon as I arrived in Japan. Issei, oh well. He was embarrassed by the praise. Asia, if you have time, please visit me at church. Promise me, okay? Issei, oh of course. See you later. He said, leaving. Asia, yes, let's meet again. Issei turned his face to her and saw her saying goodbye to him. Issei, she's a really good girl. Kuoh Academy. Student Council. It was almost time for class, but the Student Council office was packed with students. There were nearly 24 faces in that place, and the atmosphere was slightly tense. The source was the small dispute between two childhood friends and rivals. The source of these two upper-class female demons was a young girl from her school, who had been missing, probably dead, for 2 days. Sona, but you've hurt my pride as the student council president, who also tries to protect the student of this school. The courage you have. It was really rare for Sona Citri to give a loud venomous scolding to Rias Gremory, her childhood friend. However, this time it was an understatement, because someone she lusts after has disappeared, likely dead, due to her friend and rival's reckless plan. Rias looked to the side, yes, look into her best friend's eyes because she was angry and embarrassed. She was never scolded like that, except by her mother. Not even her father or older brother had her before. And also seeing the fact that she did something that greatly offended her best friend. Rias knew how her best friend has an eye for Izuku Midoriya, but Sona gave her the chance to invite the official second prince of Kuoh to her nobility, stepping out of their long friendship. And now, she had ruined it all because of her reckless plan. At that moment, Rias wished she could have listened to Sona and Drake, and invited Izuku Midoriya as normal, instead of planning to kill him at the hands of the fallen angel. But unfortunately, what happens happens. There was no going back to the past, even with magic. And now she's made a big mistake that threatens her long standing between her and Sona. After Sona finished her long, nasty speeches, the student council office was silent. The room was filled with weirdness, so thick it could be cut as easily as a hot knife through butter. If only she was a normal student, Sona wouldn't be mad like this. If only she was a normal student, Sona would scold Rias because of her wounded pride as student council president. Izuku Midoriya was someone Sona really wanted in her nobility, having potential that even Drake confirmed. He was smart, for a commoner he was always number 1 in his 3rd year. He always stays right in class. He had a good track record. Good understanding ability. He was considered a genius. Frankly, he was perfect, and also one of the most famous people in the world. That couldn't be hidden so easily. OCD OCD. A noise was heard at the door and everyone turned their attention to her. When the door opened, a small girl was revealed. She was a petite girl with white hair and golden eyes. The front of her hair has 2 long bangs that go past her shoulders and several loose bangs hanging over her forehead, while the back is cut short. She also wears a black suit-shaped clip on either side of her hair. It was Kaneko Tuju, the tower of Rias Gremory and a Nekishu, a variant of Nikomata. Rias, what happened, Kaneko? She asked her servant. Kaneko and Kiba were the most affected by the death of their friend, Kaneko had gone to the top of the building as that was where Deku always took her to eat sweets he made, while Kiba had gone to the Kendo club as there it was, where both always trained. Kaneko, Bucho, Kaicho, you need to see this, she said in her monotone voice as she approached the window. Everyone approached together wanting to know what was going on, and when they looked at where Kaneko was pointing, their eyes widened. There was Deku at the gate talking calmly with Murayama, Kates, and Kiba. Rias widened her eyes at this. Deku was totally fine and alive. This should have been impossible, as Rias had seen the big blood spot in the park, and knowing that the fallen angel was alive, Rias knew the blood was Deku's. Sona and Rias along with everyone were perplexed to see this. Then, to the surprise of the two heirs of the 72 pillars of the underworld, Deku turned his gaze to them. He was looking right at them. It actually felt like he was looking into their souls. A look of someone who knew everything, a look that made Sona and Rias look insignificant. For a moment, what was in Sona and Rias' vision was not Deku. What was in front of them was a huge dragon that looked at them with the purest disappointment and insignificance. That image had disappeared as fast as it had appeared, and what replaced that image was Deku with a slight smile on his face. While Rias and the others were baffled that Deku was alive and Rias transfixed by that image, Sona had very different thoughts. Only one thing went through Sona's mind. Sona, does he know? Later the same day. With Rias. She was talking to Issei. Rias, never approached the church again. Issei just grunted in response, not understanding. Rias, for us demons, a church is the enemy's territory. If we got closer to there, the problems of demons and gods became much bigger. You never know when the arrows of light will come flying towards you. Issei, why really? So that frightening feeling I got as I approached the church was. Rias, I'm sure it was your demon instincts. Being close to someone in the church is the same as fraternizing with the enemy, especially church exorcists. Because there are exorcists who are able to use the sacred gear. Issei started having memories of the green light that came out of Asia's hand. Rias, Issei. Issei, why yes? Rias, if a demon is exorcised by someone from the church, it dies eternally. With nothing. Not feeling anything. Not being able to do anything. Do you understand the gravity of this? Issei, no. He looked to the side with his head down. Rias, I'm sorry I got carried away. Anyway, be more careful from now on. Issei, right? With Deku. Right after school, Deku returned home to find that Ophis had eaten all the food he had made and was intently watching TV without even blinking. Ophis, where are you going? She asked in her monotone voice as she looked to her side. Beside her was Deku in his mercenary outfit. Deku, I'll do my part. The perverted crow already sent me the money. I just need to eliminate the other useless crows from existence. The Azazel had contacted him so he could kill the fallen angels who were causing trouble in Kuoh. As if the heiresses Citri and Gremory were killed, it would result in a war again. Deku didn't mind that, please. He didn't do favors. He had to receive money in return, and it wasn't little. He killed for money, not caring about anything else. Apart from his foster parents, nothing in the world interested him. Besides, it was all money. Azazel had said that he had a nun who had been kidnapped, and that the Black Swordsman would have to free her from the fallen angels. Ophis looked at Deku as he tilted his head a little. It didn't look like anything to anyone, but Deku understood what Ophis meant. Deku, I do it myself, it's not necessary for you to come, he said, getting a nod from Ophis. Deku had done a mission with Ophis in the past, so he would never do it with her again. The Ouroboros dragon did not know the meaning of the word restriction. An entire town in the French countryside had been destroyed by this. Ophis, I'm hungry. She spoke monotonously as her stomach growled. Deku sighed at this. Only Ophis would eat enough food for 10 people in an afternoon, and would still be hungry. Now he understood why she was considered the dragon god of infinity, not because her power was infinite, but because her hunger was infinite. Deku, what do you want to eat? He asked calmly. Ophis, Inarazushi. she said as her eyes lit up a little. Deku, right. He started to head towards the door, since there should be a shop open by now so he can buy the ingredients. Ophis, don't delay. I'm hungry, she said, making Deku's eyes twitch. 2 hours later. Deku clicked his tongue, wanted to and was still bossy. Why didn't she go in his place then? Since was in such a hurry, do it yourself. Meanwhile, Ophis is back to watching TV normally. The abandoned church in the city of Kuoh was placed on a hill that stood in a corner of the city. Because? It must be pretty obvious, since Kuoh's city was actually Devil's territory. The church could not get close to the demons or be seen as aggressive against them. And after what happened in the Great War, clearly they couldn't start having the war, not if they wanted to avoid being annihilated entirely. Technically, after priest and the sisters in that church were brutally killed in one night, the place got abandoned and gloomy. Technically, the church wasn't demons or angels' territory, at least the Church of Kuoh, it was fallen angels' territory. Honestly, a war between the three factions just hadn't taken place yet because Surzex, Michael and Azazel were indifferent about it. What Deku was going to do could also be considered a declaration of war against the angel and fallen angel factions, as he is a pure-blooded demon and the son of Surzex and Graphia. But Deku doubted that they wanted a war with him. After all, if they don't want to fight each other, of course they never liked fighting Shiva and the Hindu faction. Besides, if he knew he was the king of the Mad Dragons, well, who was an idiot to stand up to the one who was dubbed the strongest existence, surpassing the Great Red? Coming out of his thoughts, Deku trucks toward the church's double doors. The wooden doors that once looked like a beautiful gate to the wonderful palace have been reduced to a pitiful state. He kicked open the door, which not only opened, but literally flew, crashing and falling to the ground a few feet from his location. He took another step forward and entered the church, his heterochromatic eyes scanning the building's hallway. Everything looked normal. There were chairs and seats for people to sit and pray if they wanted. There was even an altar and a cross like in a normal church. He can easily hear whispers and see small shadow movements. On both sides, no doubt they were planning to ambush him. Deku, I know you guys are there. Get out before I force you, he said calmly. As soon as he said that, it didn't take long for a group to respond. On one side of the aisle, a white-haired man with red eyes, wearing a sky priest robe as he claps his hands with a joyful smile adorning his face. The man didn't show any signs of surprised concern that Deku had just walked in, but instead looked amused. Well, what do we have here? He asked jovially with a big smile on his face. Some kind of child that got lost? What do you want, boy? Do you want to pray to God, perhaps? Deku, I came to rescue the nun, and if you can speed me up, can you deliver her soon? Or will you want to do it the hard way? The answer was what he expected. As soon as he spoke, the man's smile faded a little, but I didn't expect a smile from the man to get even bigger, along with a crazy smile. Ah, so you're here for little Asia, eh? Oopsie, sorry kid, but you can't take it, he happily declared. Now, since you've declared your intention, then it's okay if we kill him, right? From both hallways, a group of people entered. They all wore tunics and white clothes like priests, but he knows none of them were priests. The man laughed in delight as he raised his sword and gun, and his tongue rolling around like crazy, he gave Deku another of his insane smiles. So are you ready to die, boy? Eh? Are you afraid? Are you afraid? Ah, don't worry, let's make you scream well. He didn't finish when his head was already away from his body. Impossible. He spat blood. In that he saw the sword that was in the hands of Deku. The man's eyes widened and then fear invaded him. The Black Swordsman? You weren't supposed to be here. Deku didn't even look at him. Deku freed Zelzin, guilty of murdering 147 people and raping 24 women, 10 of whom were nuns working in the church. Freed, eh? Am I that famous? You'll never be able to get out of here. Black Swordsman, you will never be able to fight them all. Deku, fight? You are nothing more than dog food. A sinister silhouette formed from Deku's dog-like body that had multiple eyes and mouth watering. The dog attacked Freed's body and ripped the flesh. although Deku knew that body was just a simple clone. The lost priests began to tremble and tried to flee, but they had no reaction when their head was decapitated and then their body was devoured by the dogs. Deku's eyes roamed the church, which was in terrible condition. The wooden benches were splintered, broken, and scattered. Wood chips were scattered on the floor. Of the dozens of exorcists who were there, only a crimson liquid remained that adorned the walls and floor of the church. As Deku prepared to enter the trapdoor, someone got out first. "Who are you?" The short question is which one, a felt hat and a man wearing an overcoat. He has an elegant look and a handsome European facial stature. Danasik. The only male that Deku got to see. Before Deku could answer his question, two silhouettes appeared. The first was a tall woman with straight, bright blue hair. She wore a tight suit, the color of blood red, accentuating her breasts, slim, slender waist and wide, magnificent hips. Her short skirts let you see her pair of full, reflective thighs. His narrowed golden eyes stared at Deku warily. She was Kuoh. The last silhouette belongs to a line of petite girl with blonde hair and blue eyes, accentuating her easy European frame. Her untamed hair was tied in two ends with a black ribbon with white frills. She wore a Gothic Lolita dress, unlike Ophis's provocative Gothic Lolita dress. Her dress made her look like a cute daughter of a noble family. Her delicate but accentuated facial structure sent out a tsundere vibe. She was Miltet. "Deku Izuku Midoriya," he calmly replied. Danasik and Kuoh's eyes widened in surprise. Miltet was the only one who had a clueless expression. "Danasik, that's the name of our human target. Weren't you killed by Rainier?" he asked seriously as he created a spear of light in his hand. Miltet, huh? Huh. So, he's the human Rainier targets. He's really handsome, isn't he? What a shame. What a shame, let me play with him before I kill him, okay? She spoke in a childish, joyful voice. Kuoh, Miltet, shut up. He's dangerous. She whispered to Loli. Her golden eyes scanned the place, taking in the clotted blood everywhere. But when they saw the sword in Deku's hands, they backed away unconsciously. Kuoh, what is it? He asked, a little scared. Deku looked at her disappointed and didn't even bother to reply. Kuoh, answer me well, it doesn't matter, you're just a human anyway, so you're giving us a gun for free, she said as she spread her wings and flew, creating a spear of light. Deku just yawned, bored, and suddenly something like a mouth came out of the weapon and went towards Kuoh, who tried to attack him with the light spear. But it was useless as the weapon seemed to eat the skill and then form hundreds of spears of light. Danasik and Kuoh's eyes flickered in response as Miltet tried to catch Deku off guard. She arrived behind Deku and thrust a spear of light into his heart. Miltet's surprise. She shouted happily and clapping her hands. Danasik and Kuoh breathed a sigh of relief in response. At that they heard a laugh, and when they looked at the human, they saw him taking out the spear of light and then regenerating his heart. Deku, ha 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 ha, I already knew you would try to attack me by surprise. He took the Miltet by the neck and started squeezing it a little too tightly. Miltet began to gasp, as the sound of her bones in her neck began to echo. The sword Deku had that was facing Kuoh and Danasik shot the spears of light at them, hitting everyone and leaving them almost dead, as it missed a vital point. Deku dropped Miltet on the floor. Loli was foaming at the mouth and had her eyes bleeding. Deku didn't even look at her and stomped on her face, releasing the black infernal flames that completely erased Miltet's body and soul. Kuoh, please, I will do anything, spare me, I do not want to die. In pleas and moans, Kuoh begged for mercy. Deku didn't even look at her and started laughing out loud. Deku, too bad, but Azazel paid me to kill them. I am the Black Swordsman, I have no mercy and no mercy. At that moment, Kuoh and Danasik regretted following Rainier's plan. Better they had stayed in Grigori and continued their boring life and Dudley a cannon fodder. Rainier's plan was too good to be true. They believed their status would rise and they could have a good life if they followed the plan. But they never imagined that they would find, just as the plan was almost complete, the black swordsman. Deku, ha 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 ha, I don't know where fallen angels go when they die, and if they even go anywhere. I ask you to send your regards to those who were devoured and killed by my dragons, ha 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 ha. He laughed at the death of all the fallen angels who were killed in that massacre. Calawarner, why you demon? He said, totally horrified. Deku simply gave a gentle smile that contrasted eerily with the massacre he had committed. Deku, exactly. He said and waved at the sword that went towards the two fallen angels and devoured them. Then the sword returned to his hand. Deku started to walk and approached the table covering the hidden path and kicked it away. He looked at the stairs leading to the basement for a moment before teleporting there. It didn't take long for him to see a light at the end of the path, indicating that he had reached his destination. And when he came into existence, he saw them. In that big one was Asia tied to a cross while Rainier was in front of her with a distorted smile and pulling out a green light emanating from Asia's body. Rainier, finally you guys came back, he said, turning around, but was surprised by what he saw. Rainier, you? She screamed, annoyed and scared. Rainier, why are you here? What are you doing here? It's not enough to have destroyed Grigori, now you want to kill me. Deku turned his gaze so he wouldn't look at her, like the Poseidon from Shumatsu no Valkyrie does. Deku, as if an insect like you could order me around. I was paid to kill you and take that girl over there. He pointed to the nun hanging from the cross. Asia, save me. She spoke weakly but excitedly. Asia still didn't have her sacred gear road, but if Deku took too long she would have. Deku, don't worry, I'll save you. The girls seemed to get excited about it. Rainier, and how going to do that? You don't have your dragons with you. He smiled, mocking Deku. Rainier, where are those three? Deku gave a smile. Deku, well, they're not with us anymore. He responded, causing Rainier's eyes to widen in horror. Before Rainier could say anything, several dragons appeared in the sky, causing her to fall to the ground in fear. Deku, I didn't listen properly before, but you said I didn't have my dragons anymore? Mocked me, right? Rainier started to cry and started to think of some way to escape. His eyes landed on Asia and saw that she still had a chance to make it out alive. Creating a spear of light and aiming for Asia's neck, who got scared. Rainier was more than willing to lose Twilight Cure if it meant she would stay alive. After all, dead, she couldn't use that power. Rainier, if you take one more step, I'll kill her, she said with a victorious smile, while Deku just yawned. Rainier suddenly gained a sickening look as he growled in anger. Rainier, you ruined everything, she said, the anger in her voice was clear. Rainier, you ruined my whole plan, my plan for Azazel-sama, you destroyed my chance to be loved by him. She screamed out of pure hate and with a hint of desperation. Deku started laughing loudly and casually. Rainier, what are you laughing at, you bad? She screamed in fury and placing the spear of light on Asia's neck started to cry. Rainier, I had to go along with Kokobil's suggestion and follow his orders, even though I knew it was weird and there was something wrong with it, but I decided to follow him because I knew that if I was successful, Azazel-sama would look up to me, would love me, he would praise me and see me as a worthy person. Deku stopped laughing and calmly looked at the ground, as he would never look someone lesser like Rainier in the eye. To be honest, he wouldn't even look into the eyes of beings like Great Red. He only looked into the eyes of beings like him, like Subaru, Sung and Tanjiro, or superior beings like his master/father Rimuru. Or for your wives. Rainier continued her speech. Rainier, but you've just arrived here, invading and destroying everything. Not only that, you even killed fellow fallen angels. I am Rainier of the Grigori. She declared her title with a mixture of anger and madness in her tone. Rainier, and worse, you are only a human, but you have so much power as... You are just a cursed creature, your kind commits sins even darker than we do, and still you have so much power. Deku immediately noticed her tone of voice. Envy. It was clear that this woman had fallen out of envy. Her voice was sweaty, poisonous and angry, the tone of someone envious who doesn't know how to seek power for himself and goes to other people for encouragement. Rainier, I'm going to kill her, do you hear me? She screamed and pulled Asia's hair hard, and the boy let out a cry of pain. Rainier, even if you kill me, at least I'll kill you first. You will know the taste of despair and the hatred of failure for the sake of Azazel-sama and the Grigori. She screamed in sheer insanity, her beautiful face replaced by an expression of pure malice and a wicked smile. Deku, I've never failed in my life, and you won't be the one to change that. Close your eyes, girl, and don't open them until I tell you, he said calmly. Asia looked at it for a moment and nodded, closing her eyes. Rainier, who had been listening in on the conversation, had her wavering smile replaced by pure hate. How dare this being? Even now, he's still looking down at her, like she's inferior. He will pay. Rainier, watch her die. She screamed as the glow of light in her hand began to intensify and squelch. Blood spurted across the room as Rainier turned her gaze to her right arm where her spear of light is, only to see which arm was missing. Deku had pointed his finger at Rainier while her arm had been vaporized by an energy gust. Rainier's eyes widened in horror when she saw this. Rainier knew she had to escape. There was no chance of beating that monster in front of her. Screw her plan. She could steal anyone else's sacred gear right from here. Rainier created a spear of light, but didn't aim at Deku. She threw it towards the ceiling, destroying part of it, and spread her wings as she tried to flee. She should run away from there. She already knew from the start that she never had the chance to fight that monster, the king of the mad dragons. Deku simply looked at Rainier running away and materialized other weapons. Blue flames emerged in the form of chains and wrapped tightly around Deku's wrists, as a sinister long blade formed. Deku held the chain as it ignited in flames. Deku swung them around and threw the sword directly at Rainier. Due to being created by Deku's power, the sword's chains could extend limitlessly. An eternal grudge advanced, cutting and igniting the air until it hit Rainier's back, who screamed in pain when the sword plunged into his back. Pulling the chains, the blade returned to Deku, and as it was trapped in Rainier, the fallen was thrown against the ground, creating a huge crater. Rainier regained her senses for a bit, and tried to crawl away but was stopped when two holy swords emerged from the ground created by Deku, causing the fallen to scream in despair as the holy element entered her body. Deku walked calmly as the eternal grudge dragged him across the floor, making a noise that put fear in Rainier's heart. Rainier, please don't kill me, please, he screamed pleadingly, while his tears streamed from his eyes. The moment Deku arrives in front of Rainier, he steps on her head, causing her to sink to the ground. Deku, I didn't give you permission to speak, plucked Kuoh. He spoke coldly, making Rainier shiver in fear. Deku approached Rainier's wings as he grabbed them, causing Rainier to scream in pain. Deku, you're proud of your wings, aren't you? He asked calmly as a smile formed. Rainier, please don't, they are all I have, she begged, knowing what Deku wanted to do. The eternal grudge that was in the hands of undid, while from her shadow another weapon manifested. It was a longer sword than the eternal grudge, totally black with golden runes. Engraved runes were on chap, handguard, and crease. The runes gave the blade several properties that gave it different powers, including the use of ice and darkness, in addition to the ability to retrieve the weapon at any distance. Holding Rainier's wings tightly, Deku delivered a quick, accurate swing with his sword, ripping Rainier's wings off. Rainier, ah. She screamed as blood ran down her back and an immense pain rippled through her body. Deku undid his sword, while getting off Rainier's body. Rainier, while on the floor, cried and begged for it to end, while Deku looked indifferently at her. The fact that Asia doesn't hear anything that is happening there was due to Deku casting a spell to stop her from hearing. Deku, don't worry, we're done, he said in his voice devoid of emotions. Deku, not even death is something an insignificant being like you deserves. Deku raised his right hand, and in the next second the world itself seemed to shudder and scream in terror as Deku's demonic power went out into the world. Above Deku's right hand, a small sphere of red and black energy appeared, trying to devour everything in front of him, like a black hole, and the only thing stopping him from doing that was Deku. Deku's power of destruction came to life. Deku, Lotus of Annihilation. A destructive lotus-shaped energy shaped itself. Deku's voice came through with such authority that even Rainer's despair and his screams seemed like nothing. The lotus in Deku's hand slowly walked towards Rainer, who couldn't believe anything and thought she was in a nightmare. "Rainer, you monster!" she screamed in horror. "Deku, don't blame me for your death. If you want to blame someone else, blame yourself. It was your weakness that led to it." He spoke, as the lotus of annihilation fully engulfed Rainer's body, erasing her from existence. He deactivated the barrier and sighed in boredom. He turned his attention to the nun tied to the cross. Deku approached her and touched her face. "Deku, I thought she was dead, but she's only passed out from fear." "Tsk, how pathetic." Deku untied her and saw that she was quite panting, even passed out. Deku looked up while holding Asia, until he heard footsteps behind him. "Rias, who's there?" Turning around, Deku came face to face with Rias and her nobility standing there. Rias was as usual at her house, while feeling very sad for trying to manipulate Deku. Until the window, she saw several dragons with unusual sizes, which surprised her and her queen Akino. But soon these dragons disappeared and an immense amount of energy that drowned the sky came from the church. Rias hadn't confronted the fallen angels before as they had done nothing against her, but after seeing the dragons and the wave of destructive energy, she soon summoned her nobility and decided to go to the church. Arriving at the church, she can't help but be horrified by what she saw. Not only her, but all her nobility, Issei even threw up. Blood and body parts everywhere. A real massacre had taken place there. Similar to the stories her father and brother told her about the times of the Great War battlefields where everything was painted with enemy or friend blood. Rias had grown more and more afraid to find out what monster she had done. However, when she reached the end, the attention of the being who seemed to have done this turned to her and her nobility, being perplexed by the being who caused it. At the center of it all was Izuku Midoriya carrying a small blonde girl in his arms with a huge black sword at his side. "Rias, Deku-san." She spoke startled along with the rest of her nobility. "Kaneko-senpai." He spoke with his eyes a little wide. "Kiba, Deku-senpai." She spoke bewildered and scared. "Akino, Deku-kun." Her eyes looked around wide as she saw Deku in the midst of that massacre, although in the deepest places of her mind, she had found it arousing. "Issei Asia." He screamed when he saw the nun he helped in the morning in Deku's arms. When Rias was ready to speak, everything died in her throat as she looked into Deku's heterochromatic eyes. The moment she looked into those eyes, she saw death, destruction, chaos, massacre, wars, carnage. She saw the worst things committed not only by humans but also by all living beings. She saw things that would make the demons of the time of the Great War feel terrified with horror, and the angels go mad and fall from grace with such a scene. So when finally Deku looked into her eyes, her heart stopped. The air seemed to freeze. In fact, it literally freezes when all the magic in the air froze. Deep in their chests, the hearts of Rias and her nobility, even Drake, went silent as they stopped beating, while even their own lungs stopped mid-breath. Because at that moment, the only one allowed to breathe was Deku. Rias and her nobility were frozen in place, standing like a statue. So still that it was just the cold sweat that broke out on their face and a slight tremor in their limbs that told Deku they were alive. Deku looked at them knowing perfectly well what they were feeling. The time he was abandoned by Lady Might to die. When he entered the black infernal gates at the place that began his millennial torture, where both his body and soul were tortured by the black infernal flames. The divine flames capable of erasing any being from existence with just one touch. And above all, the absolute certainty that you were about to die. All trembling with the literal encounter with death, their hands open as they continued to tremble. They were snapped out of their stupor as the sound of footsteps reverberated approaching them. "Deku, she has Twilight Cure. It will be of great help to you if you transform into a demon," he said without looking at Rias and leaving Asia next to the redhead, who swallowed hard. All the 5 devils could do was fall to their knees on the ground as urine leaked out of them and their body refused to move. With Deku, he had teleported to his house, as he didn't feel like walking. Deku didn't really care about their reaction, as all they had seen and the fear they felt was all Deku had ever seen in his life. Killing, destruction, and chaos became something repeated in his life. He was, along with Tanjiro, the representation of the concept of destruction and chaos. He had seen endless wars, parents killing children and vice versa. Deku had seen things and done things that would make old-time demons proud and scared. He was called the Mad Demon, the king of mad dragons, the strongest existence of that infinite dimension. His hands were stained with so much blood that it would have been enough for him to bathe several and more suns and extinguish them. With Ophis. Ophis sat in silence while she was still browsing a plethora of TV channels. Her stomach rumbled while she was still waiting for Deku to come back with one of her favorite dishes, inarizushi. Ophis, food, 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 food. She hugged her knees as she rocked back and forth, singing the things she wanted most at the moment. She automatically presses the next channel button to try to lessen her hunger. It's edible, I say. Ophis was immediately taken out of her thoughts as she fixed herself on the TV. I survived by eating something that people thought was inedible, you know? Anything is edible if you try hard enough. The man with the survival gear said. Clearly, this is some kind of survival reality show. Ophis, is everything edible? She muttered as her eyes dropped from hunger. She then noticed the beautiful decoration of luscious candy like jewels on the wall, the extraordinary glittering lollipop like candlesticks. She slowly approaches the beautiful decoration as her mouth releases an extra amount of saliva. Ophis, so hungry. Her eyes are on the prize while. Conversation with the demons. With Deku. Luffy, you forgot the stance again, Ophis. He said, patting the palm of his hand. Ophis, I never imagined that these things would be so complicated. She replied with her expressionless face. She is also wearing a certain martial arts attire. Deku put his hand on his forehead and said, Deku, if postures are complicated, then how will you learn new techniques? Now I understand how the master felt about me. He said with a sigh, gaining Ophis's attention. Ophis, master? Did you have a master? Deku nodded in agreement, and grabbed a bottle of water to drink. Deku, yes, I have a master. Ophis, how strong is he? She asked, looking a little excited. Deku smiled in response. Deku, he's infinitely stronger than me. I never even managed to get him to fight seriously or use his power at more than 1%. Ophis looked impressed, even though her expression didn't change. Deku, changing the subject, if you really want to learn martial arts you need to at least know the stances. Ophis pouted in response. Ophis, just skip the poses. I do not need this. And you also never use postures. Deku, well, is that why I've always been training and not just relying on my power and physical strength? But since you want to fight me without posture, come on, have fun. He took a relaxed form, while Ophis stared at him monotonously. Ophis, come up. She didn't finish when her head was on the ground and Deku was on top of her. Deku, see? You didn't even react and want to be a martial artist? Are you trying to dishonor all martial fighters? He said, looking indifferently at Ophis, who had her head crushed on the floor. Ophis, you cheated. Deku, you who don't know how to lose. He got off the Ouroboros dragon. Deku, I'll show you just once. His fist started to gather cosmic energy, and then took aim at a punching bag. The blow caused cracks to happen in subspace that would be something practically indestructible, because to break a subspace you would have to have an absurd domain over space. Deku, since you don't know how to use cosmic energy, use dragon powers, you can go all out. Ophis, let me try then. Ophis' fist glowed red with her dragon energy. Deku just crossed his arms and leaned against the wall. Ophis tried to imitate what she just saw. She leaned forward just like what she witnessed, but her general posture was not adequate. Ophis mutters something incomprehensible, save for Deku, as she manages to throw the punch towards her target, but loses her balance in the process, causing her power control to slip as well. Pure dark crimson dragon power completely obliterated a punching bag before a massive burst of energy in the air. A surge of draconic power erupted violently, causing a storm of winds in all directions. Deku laughed before shaking his head dryly as his hair was blown back by the intense wind. After a few moments, everything slowly dies. Deku, I told you. Postures are important. He laughed at the fallen Ophis. Ophis blew the leaves from her face and hair. Ophis, whatever I am the infinite dragon, I have no use for these so-called martial arts. She snorted at Deku. Deku, of infinity you have nothing. And weren't you the one who wanted to learn after watching those martial arts movies? Ophis shrugged her shoulders and replied. Ophis, maybe it's because of what I ate yesterday. Deku, the instant noodles were in the cupboard. Clown who said the curtain rod is edible? He pulled Ophis by the foot. Ophis, television. She replied to Deku. Deku slapped his palm. He'll have to get rid of these absurd survival channels ASAP. Yesterday, after rescuing the nun and giving her to Rias, Deku returned home, and when he arrived he saw Ophis eating the curtain rod. Well, he didn't do anything, he just laughed at Ophis and then went to prepare something for her to eat. Deku, you need to stop taking everything so literally, honestly. Ophis, I'm hungry. She immediately changed the subject. Deku, what a hungry dragon. He ruffled Ophis's hair wearily. The Ouroboros dragon clearly likes this, as he leaned in to touch like a cat. Ophis, I'm not a hungry dragon. I'm just selfish sometimes. Deku, sometimes? More like most of the time. He said, sighing. Ophis, but you're not complaining, are you? She softly murmured. Deku sighed for the umpteenth time. Deku, what do you want to eat? Ophis, the usual. She said as a portal appeared in front of them. Seeing that it would be too troublesome not to fulfill her wish, Deku nodded before they both returned home. In the kitchen, Deku was preparing some pancakes. Their master/father Rimuru always taught them everything they would need to survive. From preparing food from the strangest things and making them taste good, producing weapons, blacksmithing, doing everything Rimuru taught. The Crimson Satan's son casually tossed the pancakes to the other side of a skillet, whistling in a gleeful tone as he sliced onions in his other hands in a way that would make even the most skilled chef envious. It was more a show of skill than cooking itself if anyone became a witness to it, which in this case was a dragon god of infinity. Ophis anxiously waits at the table. After such intense training, anyone would need some snacks and some food. An army marches on your stomach. Without exception, the Ouroboros dragon also marches on its stomach. Ophis, today it is surprisingly peaceful, she commented while drinking her tea. Deku nodded casually as he continued to make breakfast. Deku loves and enjoys having a good battle more than just about anything, but that's not all for him now. He has a lot of hobbies and fun instead of fighting, like playing and gardening, as he liked the peaceful smell that the vegetation gave off. To be blunt, Deku doesn't hate peace, he just gets bored with it sometimes. Well, no one can blame Deku for feeling that way. He didn't live a normal life in any of his reincarnations. For Deku, who was already called as God of Calamity, it was not a bad thing. But everything also becomes boring when there's nothing to do. The fights didn't have the same fun. As a child it was still fun since he hadn't regained his power. But when he became a teenager, his power went back to 50%, even with all the limitations on his body, the containment seals, nothing helped him in a battle. So the only way he had to relieve himself was to play or garden. He had no attachment to the world and didn't care about destroying it, as he had already gone as far as to destroy half the universe in his fight against Great Red. And that was one of the reasons Ophis was interested in Deku, not only for his power, but also for his detachment from everything. He only happened to have hobbies due to Shiva and Parvati insisting that he should do more than just fight and kill. Ophis, what are you going to do with the demons? She asked, looking at Deku drinking his floor. Deku stopped for a moment and thought about it. Deku could very well threaten or attack the two of them and wage war against the demons, something that Deku really wouldn't mind causing since the power difference is absolute. But Shiva had told him to avoid causing too much havoc in the world, and Deku would obey him. The best option for Deku these days was to befriend the demons, which wasn't really a problem. Deku enjoyed playing chess with Sona and practicing Kendo with Kiba, and chatting with Kaneko. Deku really didn't mind Rias trying to manipulate him. After all, she was a demon, and Deku wasn't too innocent to blame her, as he'd done much worse things than just manipulating someone. Perhaps the biggest problem with this was that when Deku found Rias and her nobility in the abandoned church, he used some of his power to show Rias' insignificance at that moment, as he didn't want to waste time. So it was likely that they were afraid, but Deku knew it would be easy to regain his trust due to being their friend and Rias being his fan. Honestly, it was very easy to manipulate a person when he knew how they felt. And also many interesting things would happen in Kuoh due to the presence of the two heirs of the 72 pillars of the underworld, and if they left, this would no longer happen. Deku, well, Lord Shiva has forbidden me to cause senseless chaos and destruction, so I'll do it. I think I'll just ally myself with the demons. He spoke calmly. Ophis didn't say anything, but she didn't say anything as the aroma of the food slowly tickled her senses. After a few minutes, Deku brings the prepared food to the table. Ophis can't wait any longer. She immediately eats miso soup, fried tofu, sliced fish, pancakes, basically anything on the table. Deku, you should have changed your title. Ophis, the Dragon of Gluttony. He shook his head and said before slowly consuming his share. Ophis, it's not my fault. Your food is good. She muttered. Deku laughed, as he doesn't disagree. The atmosphere is one of comfortable silence. The small feast took less than half an hour, mainly because of Ophis's enormous appetite. Ophis, thanks for the food, she said with a happy smile. Deku nodded. The infinite dragon is surprisingly easy to please. She causes trouble at times, but definitely brightens up the Calamity God's boring life. Deku Ophis. The Ouroboros dragon cocked its head curiously. Deku, are you still putting together your small group? He asked nonchalantly as he loaded the used dishes into the dishwasher. Ophis' expression turned serious. She doesn't answer because she's thinking how to answer. Deku shook his head almost disappointingly. If his speculation is true, then Ophis still can't understand the impact only Great Red. Everything existed for a few reasons. The same applied to the true Red Dragon God. Great Red is the embodiment of dreams and illusions. Without him, Deku is sure the cataclysm won't be far away, not that he minded. Deku, Ophis, I've told you many times, killing that red lizard is not an option. Ophis, I'm not planning to kill that animal, despite my personal wish. I'm going to force that ugly chameleon out. That's it. Deku blinked a few times. Deku, I see. Ophis, aren't you upset? She asked, curious. Deku shrugged his shoulders. Deku, worry? No, as long as he lives I'm fine. Just make sure not to overdo it. I would not like to see one of my subordinates killed while carrying out his plans. Ophis, I understand. She nodded her head. Deku, good. Ophis, will you help me? Deku, no, he said, rolling his eyes. Ophis pouted. It seems like she has to keep pestering him in hopes of convincing him to get the Great Red out of the dimensional rift. Kuoh Academy. Occult Club. The Kuoh Academy Occult Research Club was originally abolished due to lack of membership. After their entry into high school, Rias and Aquino revived the club as president and vice president, eventually turning it into the base for Rias and her servants. The club itself serves as a front for Rias' servants and other supernatural individuals in order to get out of school activities or classes in an emergency, such as having to hunt down a requested demon or to destroy a fallen angel. The Lost Dormitory has been secured with school resources and is used as a base that prevents scrutiny from other students. The clubhouse is a 3-story building, with the 3rd floor serving as the clock tower. It was painted white with a black roof with vines climbing up to the 2nd floor. The interior of the club room is a wood-paneled room with Victorian-style sofas and chairs along the walls. A side set up to be used as a toilet, and a large Gremry family magic circle is also there to allow teleportation from them to and from customers. Sales was totally quiet. Currently I was present in her Rias, and along with her nobility and Asia, everyone except Asia was looking somber. In front of Rias was Sona along with her nobility as well. Everyone was in the room with an uncomfortable silence permeating the place. After her meeting with Deku at the church, Rias had been extremely surprised that he knew about the supernatural world like this. But it wasn't just that it left her perplexed. What really baffled her was what she and her nobility saw in Deku's eyes. So much death, destruction, wars, battlefields painted entirely red from the blood, all that destruction Rias remembered being similar to the stories her father and brother told her. Rias and her nobility had been paralyzed for several moments until Sona and her nobility arrived and helped them. Rias hadn't been able to sleep well that night as the memories of her encounter with Deku tormented her. Sona, who watched her best friend and rival's expression, couldn't help but shudder at her. Sona herself had been stunned by what she had seen when she got there. And so, now they are in a huge dilemma, as only Deku's gaze was able to do that to Rias and her nobility, including the Welsh dragon, already meant that he was much more powerful than any of them there. Talk talk. Everyone's concentration was taken away with the slamming of the door. Sona turned to the door and said, "Come in," causing the door to the Occult Research Club to open. When the door opened, it was revealed someone who made Rias' blood run cold, and everyone was surprised. Izuku Midoriya was standing in the doorway looking at them calmly. "Rias, Deku-san." She stuttered with a little fear evident in her voice. "Sona, what a surprise, Deku." She spoke calmly, suppressing the fear inside her. Deku smiled before fully entering the room and sitting on the couch, crossing his arms. "Deku, I think we have something to talk about, right?" He spoke in a bored tone. Everyone, especially Sona, nodded. The room was silent, while everyone had their eyes directed towards Deku, who was sitting on a part of the couch with his arms crossed. "Deku, I think you must have questions." He spoke, taking everyone out of their thoughts. Sona, "Yeah, that would be nice," she said. Since she saw her friend, she still couldn't think straight. Deku sighed, seeing Rias' terrified and scared look, that although Deku admitted that he liked seeing someone like that talking, he wouldn't go anywhere like that. Deku extended a single finger towards Rias, who widened her eyes, but a green glow took over Rias as she started to feel calmer and more peaceful. "Sona, what was that?" she asked curiously. "Deku, a spell that soothes the hearts of others. It is good for calming the hearts of the terrified," he said, surprising everyone. "Sona, it's an interesting spell," she said, adjusting her glasses. Deku's gaze changed to a serious one. Deku then asked, "Sona, what was that?" she asked, referring to what had happened at church yesterday. "Deku, the fallen angels had tricked that nun over there and planned to extract her sacred gear, killing her in the process." Everyone nodded their heads. "Sona, and who was it?" she asked calmly, though she could feel a little jealousy in her voice. "Deku, I just said, look at her over there." He pointed at Asia. "Kiba Asia? Is she from the church?" he yelled in bewilderment, looking at Asia. "Deku, she was a nun, but she was excommunicated for curing a demon. So I saved her for money." Everyone looked at him with a raised eyebrow. "Sona, for money?" "Deku, yes, I was paid to kill the fallen angels and rescue the nun." "Sona, and who would that person be?" "Deku Azazel." Sona and Rias' eyes widened. "Issei Bucho, who is this Azazel?" "Rias, he's the leader of Grigori." Issei stopped to think. Rias put her hand on her forehead, seeing that he didn't understand. "Rias, the leader of the fallen angels." "Sona, but how did you kill the fallen angels? You were a normal human until these days." She spoke wildly. "Deku, I never said a normal human." He spoke, making the two's eyes widen. Deku looked at Issei and said, "Deku, it's not Red Dragon," he said, narrowing his eyes at Issei, who at the same time knelt down. "Issei, what's going on?" Drake just watched everything. "Deku, dragons are a proud race, Hayadu. They would never bow to anyone, but the way you are, it's pretty easy for you to smear the dragon's name inside the sacred gear in the future." He spoke and stopped putting pressure on Issei, who was holding his neck for breath. Sona, are you a dragon? That was the question everyone had on their mind. Deku, more or less, I'm a mixture of different races. Sona, which ones? Deku, I don't think that's any of your business, he said coldly, paralyzing Sona, but it made one of the Sona nobility angry. Saji, hey, look how you talk to Sona Kaicho Shiaze. He didn't finish when Deku sunk his head into the ground, breaking him with shock. Deku, and who are you to talk to me? He said, lifting Saji by the neck. The nobility of Sona drew their weapons and aimed at Deku. Tsubaki, stop it, Deku-kun, if we don't have to. Deku started to laugh uncontrollably. Deku, I think you should look at yourself. From your shadow a sword came out. Sona and Rias looked at the sword in surprise. Sona, you are. Deku, yes, I am the Black Swordsman. The eyes of both heiresses widened. Kiba, is this a Kaicho problem? He asked curiously, seeing the gigantic amount of aura the sword released. Sona, the Black Swordsman is very famous in the supernatural world, she said, making everyone's eyes widen. Akino, curious famous? Sona, the Black Swordsman is considered one of the greatest mercenaries in the world, he said, shocking everyone there. Deku almost laughed at their expression. Really, he was quite well known in the supernatural world, but he had several identities. By his titles of King of Mad Dragons and King of Destruction, he was known as Shiva's right-hand man. Deku had created an alter ego to do missions, from seeking information, assassination or bodyguarding, so he became a very famous mercenary under the alias of Black Swordsman. He had already done several missions for the most different pantheons, from the Nordic pantheon, Shinto, Greek, Egyptian, Chinese and etc. Doing any mission as long as they pay well. Kiba, what? He asked, surprised. Sona, from what my sister told me, the Black Swordsman is considered one of the greatest mercenaries in the world and has worked for different factions, doing many dangerous missions and leaving without a single scratch. Becoming famous for completing all the missions he accepted without fail, having even killed gods, she informed, making everyone's eyes widen. Rias, why you killed gods? He asked, bewildered and scared. Deku nodded his head before turning his attention to the ground. Deku, that's right, I've killed several gods for money. Rias, but you're a human, she said, shocked, for no human could kill a god. Deku, you shouldn't underestimate humans, Rias. Many of them are stronger than supernatural beings. He spoke, making Rias look regretful. Deku, also, I never said I was human, he said, making everyone's eyes widen. Deku raised his right hand and stretched out a finger. 100 on top of his finger appeared a small sphere of red energy. Rias, that's the power of destruction, he said as he got up. Sona, you're part demon Bale, he said, surprised. Deku just nodded in boredom, deactivating his magic. Kiba, how did this happen, Deku-senpai? He asked curiously, which made everyone look at Deku. Deku, when I was born, I had a low amount of demonic power, so I was abandoned by my parents, he said nonchalantly, making everyone lower their heads. Kaneko-senpai, she said sadly. Deku, don't worry, I don't care about that any more than I care about my parents, he said calmly, though everyone's pity wasn't gone. Akino looked at Deku sympathetically, as she too had been abandoned by her father and was still responsible for her mother's death. Sona, Deku, Drake said he felt the aura of a dragon coming from you, is that true? She asked, as she doubted that the image of that huge dragon was just a hallucination. Deku, I'm a dragon too. Everyone nodded at Deku's words. Sona, so what do you do in Kuoh? Deku looked at her doubtfully. Sona, the fact that you are the Black Swordsman means that you are someone famous in the supernatural world, so why are you one of the most famous mercenaries in the world in Kuoh? I could say that this was a hostile act. Sona even thought that Deku could have been hired to kill them, but if that happened, she doubts that they would still be alive. Deku, I like Kuoh, It brings back good memories. Rias, even so Deku, you should have warned him. You're in our territory after all, she said firmly. Deku started to laugh, pulling a vein from Rias' forehead. It was a rather futile attempt to intimidate him. The demons, especially the Gremry, were very greedy and were always possessive of what was hers. This implied with Rias's way and her territory which she barely managed. Deku, that's fun. It's not her territory, you've taken it. It is the territory of the humans, they who built and developed Kuoh, not you, or am I mistaken? He said, talking to Rias. Deku, besides, I have this. He took a piece of paper out of his pocket and handed it to Sona. Sona, what is it? She asked curiously as she looked at the content. Deku, a contract signed by Amaterasu, the leader of the Shinto pantheon, that allows me to walk around Japan unhindered, he said, making the demons widen their eyes. Sona, how? She asked, surprised. Deku, as you said before, I've done several missions, and among them, some for the Shinto pantheon, and I received this authorization to travel all over Japan without being interrupted. Sona and everyone had looks of disbelief, especially Sona, as with that, Deku had more authority over Kuoh than they, the demons. Sona, I see, so you can roam around Kuoh freely, she said with a nod from everyone. At this, the attention of everyone but Deku was turned to Rias, who let out a small cough to get everyone's attention. Rias, so I'd like to make you an offer, Deku-san. Deku cocked his head to the side, so as not to look at Rias, admiring the rug in that room, which hurt Rias' pride a bit, as everyone talks to her and looks her in the eye. Deku, and why would I do that? He asked, making Rias stop. Rias was quiet for a while and then replied. Rias, well, you would become a lot more powerful, and you would also gain a lot more influence, just like it was a lot of money. Of course, you would start out as a low-class demon, but you would quickly rise to high class or even supreme class with your power. And as a Gregory, I treat my servants like my family, just as you could always count on us. I swear by my status as heir to the Gremry clan, she said calmly, because in her mind it wouldn't be a bad deal. Deku didn't even think to answer. Deku, you went from trying to kill me to formally offering me up? He asked, making Rias startle. Rias, what? Deku, I already knew everything. Do you think I would be that naive? Were you plotting my death like you did with Issei to gain his trust? Ha ha, what a joke. I'm not like that pervert, he said, making Issei click his tongue, annoyed. Sona, afraid? Are you angry? Deku raised an eyebrow. Deku, anger at you guys? Why would I feel this way? For me, you are just a few more in my life. Besides, I've done worse things than just manipulating someone. Everyone was surprised at the mysterious tone Deku used to speak. Sona, so that's your answer? Even if you don't want to ally yourself with Rias, I would offer you a place. Deku, haha, that's really interesting. I'd rather serve you than Rias, who's a spoiled brat, he said, making Rias feel offended, and Sona smiled, thinking he had accepted. Deku, but I guess you guys didn't hear what Drake said, did you? A dragon would never bow to an inferior like you. I've never even looked into a god's eyes, see there in your, he said, making Sona feel her ego being bruised. Although she couldn't disagree, he had already killed gods, the difference in strength between them was far superior. Sona, I see, so I'd like to ask you a question, Deku, she said, making Deku's attention go back to her. Sona, who trained you? Everyone was surprised by this question. Deku put his hand on his face and smiled. Deku, that was an interesting question. I conquered my power alone. Years and years torture you to reach that level. But I have one person worth mentioning, one person I consider a second mother, the Celtic witch Scathach, he calmly informed, causing everyone's eyes to widen. Sona, wait a minute, the god slayer? She screamed in disbelief, along with the others who were also perplexed. For Deku, that wasn't training, it was just child's play. He had found the Scathach when he was 7, before his fight against Great Red. He was curious about her. After all, she had killed so many beings that she obtained immortality, so in a world where the age of gods still existed, it was possible that she was still alive. He had obtained information from Shiva, saying that she was trapped in the Shadowland. So thanks to that, he managed to travel to the Celtic pantheon in search of the Land of Shadows, and surprisingly, he found it. He invaded the Shadowland and once came face to face with the immortal witch, where he challenged her to a battle. He ended up winning the battle, because even after facing Shiva, he found the fight fun. At first with disdain, just like Shiva at first, she ended up accepting the fight, and unbelievably, she lost to a 7-year-old child. However, Scathach wasn't sad about losing, she seemed happier. It was a fight of pure brute force, without using magic. The fight lasted 7 days and 7 nights. Scathach couldn't hide her surprise to see a small child going toe-to-toe with the use of a spear. Even with all her techniques, the boy dodged everything and used them against herself. Deku had God's eyes of destruction that copied everything he saw, looking only once. Which made fighting fun for Scathach, as she was forced to come up with new spear techniques mid-battle. After that, Scathach started treating Deku like his own student. She was the first person to see his complete arsenal of weapons. All kinds of weapons were in that safe. Among all the weapons there were some that were on a hill. She soon understood that they were his strongest. The immortal witch asked Deku to kill her with one of the anti-immortality swords, but Deku refused, as he would never kill her, since he had an attachment to her. Deku knew that the immortal witch's heart had softened over time with him. He even pondered for a moment maybe he should pay her a visit, or invite her to your house. Kaneko, surprising. She spoke in surprise along with everyone. Everyone's attention was called to Sona, who let out a cough. Sona, so Deku, allow me to ask again. Are you our ally or not? She asked, gaining everyone's attention. Deku seemed to think for a moment, until he crossed his arms and turned his attention to Sona. Deku, I'm not here to be enemies. He spoke with a smile that reassured everyone. A relieved sigh was heard from everyone in the room, especially from Rias, as he didn't seem to hold a grudge against her. Deku didn't hate demons, he didn't really have any kind of hatred or dislike for him. Even for Gremmaries or his parents, he didn't really care. Everything around him he treated as indifferent, and didn't give a damn. However, he was not an enemy of the demons. But it wasn't your ally either. Deku, that's it, isn't it? Now I can go. He got up from the couch, but was surprised by a hug. He looked to see who it was and saw that it was Asia. Issei got jealous, said. Issei, damn it, why all the hunks who hook up with the most beautiful women? He said, falling on the floor, crying comically. Saji did the same thing, since Deku had stolen Sona's love. Issei got punched by Kaneko that sunk his face into the ground, and Saji got punched by Sona. Kaneko, pervert, she said with her monotonous tone, looking at Issei holding his head in pain. Deku hugged Asia back and she said, Asia, thank you so much for saving me, she said with an innocent smile. Hallucinations came to Deku's mind, memories of his old girlfriend. Tears started streaming down his cheeks, surprising everyone there. They were going to ask, but just one look from him made them shut up. Deku, you're welcome. The god of destruction. Deku, my lord, did I say you wanted to see me? To a spectator oblivious to the situation, it would be a consultative view when a boy, or rather a young man, addressed an even younger boy as his master. They were in a spacious but extravagant room. Gold-plated pillars and jewels on the walls represented beautiful works of art composed of humanoid figures with certain details that were quite attractive. After all, humans didn't have 3 heads or 6 arms. At least they shouldn't. Shiva, yes, Izuku, the youngest replied. His voice was soft, but it had a commanding tone that demanded respect and attention, even if it wasn't on purpose. The one kneeling was none other than Izuku Midoriya. Known around the world by various titles, the Invincible Warlord, the God of Calamity, the Black Swordsman, the King of Mad Dragons, and also the right-hand man of the Hindu god of destruction Shiva. The being who sat on the throne to whom Deku was kneeling was a handsome young man, a normal-featured high school student having a well-structured face, with green and black hair that appears more bluish. He has a keen eye that possesses a bottomless divinity and boundless superiority that makes people tremble in fear. With the only exception being the being in front of you. This was Shiva, one of the Trimurti and the god of destruction in Hindu mythology. He is ranked in the highest rankings of the top 10 strongest beings in the world, and Deku's adoptive father. Shiva, you know you don't have to call me that, you can call me father. He said it in an amused, relaxed tone, though his very presence still showed power. Deku just looked at Shiva and said, Deku, I insist. He said seriously, making Shiva sigh. Shiva, I heard that you came in contact with the demons. He said calmly. Deku, they're quite interesting, so to speak. He calmly said to his foster father. Shiva couldn't help but look at his adopted son and sigh. Even for him, Deku was a mystery. Don't get it wrong, Shiva loves Deku like a father would love his son. When Shiva first met Deku, he thought the boy was crazy for defying him, but he still accepted and was surprised to be defeated by him. Over time, Shiva tried to understand Deku. He wanted to understand what was going through the boy's head. At first it was curiosity and sadness for what happened to him, but over time, Shiva really started to see Izuku as his son. Deku was someone who showed no emotions. It was different from the Ouroboros dragon, who really had few emotions for his innocence and naivety. In Deku's case, it was as if he really didn't have any emotions. He didn't feel empathy for his enemies. He didn't feel anger for what his parents did to him. He didn't feel remorse for killing other beings. He didn't feel sadness or anything. It was as if he was already used to wanton killings. Deku was someone who could give such a genuine smile, and you would think he likes it only for him to stick a sword in your heart with the same smile. The hollow, opaque tone he used to speak, as if he were dead. A doll. A machine. A puppet. Heartless and emotionless, a machine that worked for its goals. Shiva got very scared when he saw his eyes as he took off the cloth that covered his eyes. They had no life, they were totally dead and without any shine. He was a very cold, insensitive and dispassionate individual, as well as being indifferent to everything he saw. The only feeling that made Deku move was his desire to find a fun fight, which led him to meet Shiva and Skathak. Shiva was one of the few who was able to see beyond Deku's mask and understand what he was like, and even then, Shiva didn't quite understand. But one of the things that intrigued Shiva the most was the fact that Deku didn't feel hatred or desire for revenge for what his parents did to him. Once Shiva had asked this to Deku and was still surprised by the answer given by him. I have no reason to try to do something so futile. Revenge is foolish, a poison that you take thinking you are poisoning the other, but in fact, you are the one who is slowly poisoning yourself. The best way to get revenge is silence. What was I going to do after completing my revenge? What would be left for me? There would only be an even bigger void in my heart. I have enough power to destroy everything. My dragons would take care of everything for me. Shiva couldn't help but be surprised by Deku's thought, his indifferent manner even before what happened to him. Shiva, I see. Parvati is looking for you. He said in an amused tone when he saw Deku wince a little. There were few people that really made Deku a little afraid. In fact, there were only two, and it wasn't even due to the fight but to how they marked him. The first was Skathak, the Celtic immortal witch and also the one Deku considers a mother. Next up was Parvati, the mother goddess of Hinduism and Shiva's first wife, as well as the self-proclaimed mother of Deku. When Deku was adopted by Shiva, this was announced to several of the Hindu faction members, and some of them were not happy that a mere demon was the adopted son of the god of destruction, but most were fine with it as this mere demon fought and defeated Shiva in confrontation when he was only 5 years old. And by far the happiest was Parvati, Shiva's first wife, who made her the best mother possible for Deku, to the point of being suffocating. Due to the gods having a low birth rate, it was rare for the gods to have many children, and so Parvati was very happy to have Deku as a foster child. She literally did everything she could to make Deku happy and especially find someone worthy to keep her little treasure, as she says. It got to the point where she visited other mythologies to find him a bride. Obviously the demon rejected them all, but still Parvati didn't give up. Shiva also had to hold Parvati as the goddess wanted to descend into the underworld to have a talk with Graphia about what she did to her son. She was angry with the Crimson Satan's wife. Another one who was very happy with Deku's addition to the family was Ganesha, the god of intellect, wisdom and fortune for Hinduism and Vedic religious tradition, as well as Shiva's son by Parvati. The god was extremely happy with his new brother, and tried to help Deku in everything, even blessed Deku with great luck and was always trying to make his brother happy due to what he had been through. Although Deku could sweep the floor with Ganesha if he wanted to. Shiva almost laughed as he remembered that Ganesha, one of the Kama goddesses, nearly fell for Agni, the god of fire, for insulting Deku, thinking he wasn't worthy of being Shiva's adopted son. But by far, of the 3 wives that Shiva had, Deku liked to be close to Kali. Because of the 3 wives of the god of destruction, she was the calmest, and always liked to be on her own, like Deku. And this made Parvati jealous, who often got into an argument with Kali. Though Shiva had to admit that since Deku came to be part of the family it never became boring, even though Izuku's personality is indifferent. "Deku, I see," he said calmly, knowing that he would have to face Parvati sooner or later. Parvati was the epitome of Mother Bear, who was extremely protective of her child to the point of being suffocating to the demon who always lived alone. "Shiva, I will warn her. I also want to know, are you going to try to harm the demons?" he asked calmly, looking at Deku. Deku was someone who didn't really care about demons, but Shiva knew he could kill them only on a whim. "Deku, you know I'm not interested in that. Demons are a bit interesting, so to speak, and I have a hunch that various things are going to happen around them," he said, sketching a smile, looking calmly at his father. "Shiva, I see. I really don't want you to succumb to revenge," he said, and his eyes sparkled. "Shiva, I can see a bright future ahead of you, and I hope to see you join me, Vinshu and Brahma in the ranks when you are older and more experienced." Shiva really wanted Deku to become a god alongside the Trimurti. Although a demon had never been turned into a god, Shiva was sure Deku could become one. The god of destruction could sense divine energy coming from Deku, and he wanted his son to be able to master this power. Deku couldn't help but smile at the words of support. Even though he doesn't like to be called a child, as he has quadrillions of years on his back, but that would be in his original body and not the one he reincarnated in. "Deku, thank you, Dad." Shiva's eyes widened for less than a second when his son addressed him with such, as opposed to his usual formal manner, and a small smile appeared on his face. "Shiva, no problem. It is my duty as your father to keep you motivated. As long as you don't become arrogant and start abusing your power, I'm letting you have your way." "Deku, was that a indirect?" he asked, since his foster father always told him to stop looking at the ground when he was talking to someone and to look into the person's eyes. "Shiva, who knows? But that's not why I asked to speak with you." Deku got up. "Shiva, I assume you are aware of Indra and the forces he has been gathering in recent years?" Deku nodded in boredom. If Shiva allowed it, Indra would already be gone from existence. "Deku, yes." He looked directly at Shiva. "Deku, if you let me, I would solve this and Indra would no longer be a problem." Shiva sighed a little. "Shiva, I understand you, however my war against Indra is necessary. Unfortunately, when the time comes, you will be able to act," he said, making Deku nod. "Deku, couldn't you use your vision of the future for that?" he asked, curious. "Shiva, my future vision isn't as accurate as you make it out to be. Only the great events of importance are the ones I can predict. Otherwise, I would be able to see the outcome of my eventual battle with Indra. I just know it's going to happen, not how or when," he said, making Deku nod his head. "Deku, I found out that Indra met with a faction called the Heroes Faction, and 3 members drew attention, the first being Cao Cao, descendant of Cao Caomingda, the hero of chaos of the era of the 3 kingdoms and wielder of the true Longinus. A human named Leonardo and user of Longinus Annihilation Maker, and a human magician descended from Johann George Faust, the magician who made a pact with Mephistopheles and also user of Longinus Dimension Lost," he said, passing the information obtained. Being the Black Swordsman was just a facade so he could get the most varied information about any possible enemy. Shiva, I see 3 high-level Longinus? Indra is really trying hard, he said while thinking. Deku, if you want I can take care of them, he calmly said to his father. Shiva almost laughed. He didn't know if this was to lessen Indra's strength, or to see if fighting them would be fun. Shiva, no need to worry about that now. With you by my side, I have nothing to fear, he said with a calm smile. Really, with Deku by his side, Shiva need not fear Indra or anyone else. After all, he was considered the strongest existence since he defeated the Great Red. In fact, Shiva doubted nothing more about his adopted son. In the fight he had with Deku, the boy had simply put out the sun because it was getting in the way. Even in the Hindu pantheon, a pantheon known to be the strongest in the world with the power to destroy any other faction and full of powerful beings, Izuku was special. Deku was a literal god of war on the battlefield. His power made him the strongest being in the Hindu pantheon. Even among the war gods who were insanely strong on the battlefield, Deku was the only one who could call himself the invincible warlord. I decided his might on the battlefield. His immense power and mastery over any weapon made him a true monster, leaving even the true gods of war perplexed and scared. Even though Deku rarely got into a direct battle because of his dragons, his intelligence was such that all the techniques he saw just once, he could copy with the same proficiency as the original wielder. As was the case with him copying Shiva's final technique and using it against his own. Shiva, speaking of which, I am and the Ouroboros dragon is with you. Shiva knew that Deku was friends with Ophis, even though the dragon god of infinity was the leader of a terrorist faction. Shiva, do you know that she is the leader of a terrorist faction? Deku stopped for a moment and put on his blindfold, because his eyes were already hurting. The biggest problem with his eyes was the fact that they couldn't do without the blindfold or the lens to protect them. Deku, don't worry, even though she's part of the Chaos Brigade, she's a pure and naive being and fun to be with, he said, making Shiva sigh in response. Shiva knew that whatever Deku saw and found interesting, he would use it to the end and then discard it. Deku, actually, speaking of dragons, I'm thinking about making one join us, he said, making Shiva turn her gaze to him. Shiva, I am listening, he said as he started listening to Deku's plan. Being the Black Swordsman was just a facade so he could get the most varied information about any possible enemy. Shiva, I see 3 high-level Longinus? Indra is really trying hard, he said while thinking. Deku, if you want I can take care of them, he calmly said to his father. Shiva almost laughed. He didn't know if this was to lessen Indra's strength, or to see if fighting them would be fun. Shiva, no need to worry about that now. With you by my side, I have nothing to fear, he said with a calm smile. Really, with Deku by his side, Shiva need not fear Indra or anyone else. After all, he was considered the strongest existence since he defeated the Great Red. In fact, Shiva doubted nothing more about his adopted son. In the fight he had with Deku, the boy had simply put out the sun because it was getting in the way. Even in the Hindu pantheon, a pantheon known to be the strongest in the world with the power to destroy any other faction and full of powerful beings, Izuku was special. Deku was a literal god of war on the battlefield. His power made him the strongest being in the Hindu pantheon. Even among the war gods who were insanely strong on the battlefield, Deku was the only one who could call himself the invincible warlord. I decided his might on the battlefield. His immense power and mastery over any weapon made him a true monster, leaving even the true gods of war perplexed and scared. Even though Deku rarely got into a direct battle because of his dragons, his intelligence was such that all the techniques he saw just once, he could copy with the same proficiency as the original wielder. As was the case with him copying Shiva's final technique and using it against his own. Shiva, speaking of which, I hear the Ouroboros dragon is with you. Shiva knew that Deku was friends with Ophis, even though the dragon god of infinity was the leader of a terrorist faction. Shiva, do you know that she is the leader of a terrorist faction? Deku stopped for a moment and put on his blindfold, because his eyes were already hurting. The biggest problem with his eyes was the fact that they couldn't do without the blindfold or the lens to protect them. Deku, don't worry, even though she's part of the Cow's Brigade, she's a pure and naive being and fun to be with, he said, making Shiva sigh in response. Shiva knew that whatever Deku saw and found interesting, he would use it to the end and then discard it. Deku, actually, speaking of dragons, I'm thinking about making one join us, he said, making Shiva turn her gaze to him. Shiva, I am listening, he said as he started listening to Deku's plan. Forest of the Relatives 1/2. With Deku. It had been several days since Deku had his conversation with the demons and his meeting with Shiva. Although the demons were very surprised to find out who Izuku really was, they only discovered that he was the Black Swordsman, had returned to normal. Obviously, Rias hadn't given up on trying to get Deku to join her nobility, but he refused all offers. But even so, Rias hadn't given up. The reaction with the demons had remained the same, but they now knew that he knew the supernatural world. Deku was always having lunch with Kaneko and talking to Akino and Rias. Whenever he could, he would play chess with Sona and talk to Tsubaki. Deku also went on to train Kiba to better his use of a sword that Rias Knight had asked for. Deku also received a request from Dona to train her nobility, which he accepted, as he didn't see anything wrong with it. After talking to Shiva, the nicknamed God of Calamity decided that he needed to go to the Forest of Familiars, but if he remembered, Rias would go along with his nobility, and even Sona would go, so he could accompany them. Currently, Deku was sitting in his subspace, training his chi. It was a mana-like type of energy, except that it was a little harder to master. His master/father Rimuru had trained him to be able to gather chi in his body so that when he got into a fight against the leader of the Outer Gods Rimuru, he wouldn't rely on magic alone, as Rimuru could nullify any kind of magic. Even though Rimuru can nullify chi as well, he wanted his student/child to learn about external energy, as it would be very helpful. Even though the range and destruction of skills that use chi are greater than powers that use mana. And in subspace, which was a small representation of absolute void, had chi to spare. And because it is something that represents the absolute void, subspace has a better and far more refined chi than on Earth or anywhere else. It was chi that was nicknamed as primordial chi, the origin of all other chi concepts. In front of her was Ophis, who was also trying to absorb subspace chi, but it was impossible for her. If it was the chi that overflowed over the world and the heavens, she would even be able to dominate, but the chi of the representation of absolute void was impossible for someone who did not have the approval of the representative of absolute void. That is, from Rimuru. But even if he gave you approval, it would not be an easy thing to master, as his body would be in constant contact with the primordial energies. The energy of nothing. The energy of infinity. The energy of chaos. And the energy of destruction. They are the energies that govern existence, pre-existence, and non-existence. The body of someone who never went through Rimuru's training would never be able to live being in constant contact with these energies. Izuku, Subaru, Sung and Tanjiro also had immense difficulties to master these energies even with Rimuru's blessing. Deku stopped gathering chi and stood up, making Ophis glare at him. "Ophis, where are you going?" she asked, curious. "Deku, to school." Ophis looked disinterested. "Deku, and I'm also going to be late because I have to train the Sona nobility." He turned his gaze to Ophis. "Deku, there's food in the cupboard, make sure you don't eat the curtain rod, hungry," he said, causing Ophis to look at the floor in embarrassment. As I said before, Sona had asked him to train his nobility, which Izuku accepted, but I soon warned Sona that maybe she would regret it. After all, pain was the best way to train someone, something he realized with Scat Hack, and he really liked what she said. Scene change. Kuoh Academy. The ringtone of the lunch company echoed off the walls of the school as Deku set foot on the first step. The first period of classes had already ended. Although the classes were boring, Deku still attended because if he didn't he would repeat the year, not that it mattered. He just didn't want Parvati to bother him for failing, which he was sure he would. Reaching the third-floor landing, Deku turned right and made his way towards the hallway that held the lockers to grab his lunch. Walking over to his new locker, Deku took out his key and opened it. After opening the door, he looked inside before closing it instantly. Sighing, Deku finally opened his closet door only to find a visitor inside. "Deku, Kaneko, what are you doing?" She swallowed her last sip of the food she was chewing before replying. "Kaneko, eating." "Deku, my food?" She thought about it for a moment, before shaking her head. "Kaneko, yes." "Deku, why?" "Kaneko, tasty." She answered without hesitation, as if that explained everything. Kaneko was comfortably seated inside Deku's locker, her cheeks covered in red sauce, making her appear so much like a child that Deku found it impossible to believe she was a teenager, let alone a high school student. She had Deku's open and now nearly empty lunchbox clutched in her hands. Even for her small frame, the closet was too small to hold her, so he had to bend his knees to his chest and crumple himself into a ball to fit in. Deku was wondering how she got in there. After all, her locker was closed, and there was no way to open it. Deku's eyes widened as he realized that Kaneko had to teleport into her closet, just to get the food. Seeing how she was ignoring it to look for leftover food inside the lunchbox, Deku could believe it. He noticed that her second lunchbox she'd discarded under her legs had already been devoured. Deku had packed 2 boxes this morning in Kaneko's anticipation of joining him at lunch, but it seems he underestimated his appetite. Kaneko looked at Deku as she held a strip of chicken in her little fingers. "Kaneko, share?" She looked so adorable at this, her head tilted slightly to the side, that Deku couldn't help but chuckle as he took a bite of the offered food. Deku, sad, still hungry. Kaneko reached out her soft hands and began to gently caress his cheeks. "Kaneko, ready? She was apparently trying to comfort him. "Deku, I think I'll have to eat from the canteen, but I heard that their food was always kinda bland. Is it true, Kaneko?" he asked her, but hears no answers from her. "Deku, Kaneko?" Deku looked up to find that Kaneko wasn't listening. She was sitting as straight as she could in the tiny closet, staring straight ahead. Slowly, almost mechanically, she turned her head towards Deku. Her eyes, as she instantly locked on Izuku, looked like they were almost glowing with their own inner light as she asked softly. "Kaneko, kitchen?" "Kitchen club." Kaneko's eye tracked the food while Deku threw it in the air back into the pot on the fire. Deku couldn't help but comment. Kuoh Academy was truly a prestigious school, not only in the quality of its education, but also in the quality of its facilities. Just take a look at the fountain that was in the middle of the main courtyard, or the school itself that could easily be mistaken for a university building. It's not really surprising when you realize that the entire gym is owned and funded by devils. But anyway, while Deku knew of Kuoh's reputation, he never really appreciated it until he entered the cooking club, only when he laid eyes on state-of-the-art equipment, with the highest quality tools and first-class, freshly harvested ingredients. Is that finally Deku started to believe in love at first sight. Deku was cooking a quick recipe for boiled vegetables. The cooking club even offers some leftover roasted tofu from yesterday, so Deku won't take too long to cook. The quality of the ingredients guarantees a great meal. Of course, Deku had to cook for Kaneko and him, so he made sure to make enough food to feed 5, just in case. Deku saw how she was drooling lightly as her eyes never left the food for a moment. It was surprising that she was still so hungry after having already eaten 2 lunch boxes that Deku had prepared. Still watching her gaze with such longing for Deku's cooking, it made him crack a smile. Using his chopsticks, he took a piece of tofu from the skillet and threw it in her direction in a high bow. Her eyes turned up as they tracked Tuft, and when he approached her she opened her mouth and caught him in the air like a dog. Some members of the cooking club across the room erupted in applause and cheers for Kaneko there to see her little performance. The Destruction King smiled a little, before turning his attention to the kitchen. Deku remembered that even today he would need to train Sona and her nobility. Later. The courtyard was completely dark. The sun has long since set and the spotlights that were parked overhead have been turned off. The high school walls blocked out any light from any of the surrounding buildings, making the place too dark for anyone to navigate. Obviously, if this was for a normal human person, but it wasn't a problem for Deku as he was a demon he could see in the dark. It was still 10 minutes to 7 when Deku left the gym and headed for the courtyard, but he still saw a group of figures already waiting for him. It didn't surprise him so much that Sona and her nobility were only punctual, but also early. Deku easily spotted Sona from where she was along with Tsubaki at the front of the group, and he walked over to her. She already saw Deku approaching and waited for the black swordsman to arrive before starting to speak. "Sona, Deku-san, you're early," she said approvingly. "Deku, I could say the same for you." He looked at the group and counted 8 of them. The entire student council was there. "Deku, although I'm not surprised to see you here at the right time and early, I didn't expect the same from your nobility." "Sona, of course they would. As members of the student council and my nobility, they represent the school and myself. It's only natural that they never dare to be late for anything, right?" she said while somehow, even though they were in the dark with no source of light, her glasses gleamed menacingly as she adjusted them. "All yes, Kaishu." They stiffened in place and screamed in response to her question. Even Tsubaki joined them, everyone looking vaguely terrified. Deku got the feeling they have a story behind it. "Deku, actually," he interrupted her. "I was hoping you would allow me to test your nobility one at a time, before we do anything else." She looked surprised by this, so Deku started to explain. "Deku, I don't need to see how you guys train and fight as a group, because I know they'll excel at it. I'm not here to help you fight as a team, I'm here to help you fight individually. That's why I want to test your nobility, one at a time, so I can examine your individual strengths and weaknesses to know what I need to train you in." Sona looked at Deku over the rim, examining him carefully before nodding slowly, almost hesitantly, in agreement. "Sona, all right, if you feel it's necessary, I can accept that. Do you have something in mind?" "Deku, actually, yes. I already set up the gym beforehand. Everything is ready to go. I need my first examinee and we will be ready," he responded with a nod to Sona. Sona looked at the gym before turning to Deku. "Sona, you thought about it a lot, didn't you, Deku-san?" She adjusted her body as she thought for a moment. "Sona, very well. In that case, let me go first." "Deku, no," he said while shaking his head. "Deku, sorry Sona, but you'll be the last. You'll understand when it's all over and done, but for this to work, you need to be the last one to take this little test." Sona looked at Deku for a moment before sighing. "Sona, okay, but it better be worth it in the end." "Deku, it will, I promise," he assured her before turning to the rest of the nobility. Deku deliberately looked at them even though he already knew who he would choose. "Deku, so who wants to go first?" Before Sona had a chance to select her member, someone spoke up. "Saji, I will." He came forward with an arrogant smile on his face. "Saji, after hearing so many rumors about you, I want to see if anything is true." Deku didn't even look at him and said, "Deku, and I'm just seeing a bunch of shit in front of me. An arrogant idiot who without his sacred gear would be nothing," he said, irritating Saji, who tried to move towards him, but Deku's aura started to leave his body, forcing both him and the entire Sona nobility, including Sona, to kneel. "Deku, it will be you first, Tsubaki." He shook his head and deactivated his aura. "Deku, she's the queen and queen who leads when the king can't. But seeing how anxious he is, you will be her next," he said, looking at Saji, who was on the floor. Saji looked at him with frustration and irritation. "Deku, follow me," he told Tsubaki before turning around and heading to the gym. Deku heard some muffled comments behind him, probably Sona giving Tsubaki some kind of advice or encouragement, before he heard the sound of footsteps walking behind him. Scene change. Unlike the exterior, the interior of the gym was well lit. Once he reached the center of the court, he positioned himself to face Tsubaki. As usual, she had a calm, serious expression on her face, not unlike Sona's. "Deku, okay, Tsubaki, this is basically going to be a combat test. Do you have a gun with you?" Tsubaki simply shook his head and extended his hand to the right. In the air, before his hand, a magic circle with the Citri clan's design appeared. The outer half of the circle began to rotate clockwise, while the inner half began to rotate in the opposite direction. As the blue light from the magic circle began to glow, a long wooden shaft emerged from the center of the circle. Before long, a naginata was withdrawn from the circle before falling to Tsubaki's already outstretched hand. The job done, Tsubaki dismissed the circle and it soon disappeared as if it had never existed. Although Deku can feel the magic writing of the circle, Deku couldn't help but find Tsubaki's choice of weapons interesting. It was rare for a person to use a naginata instead of a spear. The naginata is a halberd of approximately 2 meters, used intensively in feudal Japan by the samurai. Deku raised his hand a little, while summoning a sword. It was a simple steel-gray sword with a leather hilt. Deku held his sword as he took his usual relaxed stance. Deku, the rule is simple, keep going until you can't fight anymore. Don't worry about getting hurt. I set up a barrier earlier that will prevent all sounds from escaping the gym, and I made preparations in case of injuries. Tsubaki walked up to about 6 meters from Deku, before stopping and assuming a proper stance. Deku, very well, I like your posture. He smiled at her, praising her. But soon her smile died and her face turned serious. Deku, start. Tsubaki lunged at him with her naginata. Deku smiled, seeing that she had already advanced without paying attention to her surroundings. The naginata went over his head and he butted Tsubaki's weapon, causing her to lose her balance for a few seconds, but then she recovered and swung her weapon around, using the momentum of the blow Deku had made. Even when it missed and Deku hit his weapon, it still continued to attack. Deku smiled as he parried all of Tsubaki's attacks. It was really quite an impressive sight. Any move was perfect as a textbook. Each attack flowing into the next and then the next, chilled what felt like an endless stream of attacks. Tsubaki never lost his cool. Even though it had been almost 5 minutes since the start of the fight, and she hadn't landed a single hit on Deku, her form never wavered. She remained calm and cool, not allowing her frustrations to cloud her judgment, and continued with her precise, well-controlled attacks. Deku had to admit, she was better than he thought. Most would have lost their composure for a long time after failing so many times and becoming more reckless in attacking until they end up pushing themselves too hard. What Deku found splendid: a true fighter must remain calm in any situation, favorable or not. Deku looked over and saw how she lightly dangled her toes from behind, the better to grip the ground. He knew she would attempt a blow which he promptly deflected with the side of his blade as he danced around her. Her style of training, waking up every morning before breakfast and every night before dinner, without fail she would take her naginata to the backyard of the house and train. Diligence, that described her perfectly. Instead of dodging the blow like she expected Deku to do, the black swordsman blocked and slammed into her. This caused her to lose her balance, allowing Deku to switch positions with her, preventing her from getting stuck in the corner. It wasn't like he trained, listening to the wind or the sea, but it didn't have to be. In the end, nothing beats basic training. The reason someone else's sword swing is faster than yours is because for every 100 strokes you practice, he has made 1,000. There are no shortcuts when it comes to real skill. If you put aside all strategy, tactics and luck, when all things are equal, the one who trained the most will always win. It was as simple as that. That's how someone developed their skills. Deku didn't come here to help improve his combat skills. He was here to make sure they could apply these skills properly, as no matter how hard you train, without experience that training becomes futile. Deku raised his arm and blocked the blow with the back of his empty left hand. The room echoed with the metal ringing yes as the naginata was stopped in place, leaving Deku's hand completely unharmed. For the first time, Tsubaki's expression changed away from the analytical gaze she'd been wearing since the fight started. She was looking at the hand blocking her naginata's bare blade. Her eyes wide, disbelief clearly written on her face, clearly not believing that Deku's body was hard enough to block her attack so easily. Even without any kind of barrier, Deku's skin could not be injured by anyone in this dimension. However, currently he himself had lowered his body's defenses to show the difference between them. Tsubaki wasn't using enough force. That was the problem with training. When it comes time for a real fight, you tend to have difficulties. You teach yourself not to swing at full strength in a fight, and that carries on to real fights. Still shocked at how easily Deku blocked her blow, she was easily pulled off her balance, and was unable to react in time to block Deku's knee from hitting her stomach. Saliva flew from her mouth as she collapsed to her knees, having a coughing fit as she dropped her weapon. Deku swung the Naginata around until he held it by the pipe and placed it over his shoulder. Deku, did you know? He started to speak, ignoring Tsubaki as she was agonizing in pain holding her stomach. Deku, in a real fight between a skilled street fighter and a professional martial artist, does the street fighter have a much more likely chance of winning? Thinking of being much less qualified? Finally, having managed to get her cough under control, she looked at Deku with confusion evident on her face. Deku, you see, it's very simple. The martial artist, for all his abilities, has no idea how to apply them in a real fight. While the street fighter knows how to effectively apply his admittedly much more limited skills in a fight. Deku spun the Naginata around as he held it out to Tsubaki. Deku, allow me to explain what I'm doing here, Tsubaki. I'm not here to train your skills, but to teach you how to fight. How to apply those same skills you've cultivated for years in a way that could actually save your life when the time comes. In other words, I'm here to teach you what a real fight is, one where you have to kill or be killed. He nodded towards the Naginata. Deku, now take it and get up. She looked at Deku hesitantly before reaching out and standing up. The moment she assumed a proper stance, Deku rushed forward and delivered a solid front kick right in the middle of the Naginata. The wooden shaft splintered and collapsed from the force of the kick, and the Dragon King's foot tore until it hit him right in the middle of his chest. Unlike the last time, she didn't just collapse, but instead flew backwards, landing several times on the wooded surface of the court, until she finally skidded to a stop after crossing halfway across the gym. She tried to push herself up with her hand, but passed out almost immediately as she coughed up a drop of blood on the floor. Deku lowered her foot and slowly began to approach her, all the while making sure to keep an indifferent look on her face. Sad though, but words are rarely enough to get the point across, not like that kind of lesson. Pain has always been a great teacher and a great motivator. There's nothing better than the pain that can simultaneously remind you that you're alive, and how easily that life can end. Scathach had established this belief in Deku. That's what Izuku was trying to do. He wanted to show her that this fight was no joke. Stopping 3 paces from her, the King of Destruction waited for her to look at him. It took a while as she had trouble catching her breath as her body continued to shudder with coughing, but eventually she did. She lifted her gaze to look at Deku, her eyes glistening with unshed tears and drops of blood staining her lips red. Deku, why didn't you volunteer? She looked so perplexed by Izuku's question, I was sure she had no idea what he was talking about. Deku, when I asked the Sona nobility for someone to audition first, why didn't you volunteer? Sona wanted to go first because she knew she needed to lead the rest of the nobility. Watching her move forward without hesitation, others would be encouraged by her actions. You, however, didn't do that. You were very passive, just waiting for instructions from your king instead of acting on your own. Even idiot Saji, with all his apparent bravery, just wanted to protect the other nobility girls in his own way, because he saw it as his duty as the only guy in the group. You, on the other hand, sat back and did nothing until ordered. He put his hand on his head and continued. Deku, you need to understand, Tsubaki. You are not just an ordinary member of the nobility. You are the queen, and the queen leads when the king cannot. Imagine, if you will, how others waiting outside to feel you had stepped up to me when I asked for volunteers instead of being forced to go first. Sona, due to her obsession with rating games, is under the illusion that she doesn't have to worry about who will lead her nobility when she falls. That the battle ends when she leaves the battlefield, but life just doesn't work that way. In war, the battle simply doesn't end with the fall of the king. The soldiers still lived and will fight as long as they have someone to lead them. His attention returned to Sona, but soon returned to Tsubaki. Deku, that's the queen's true purpose. Not simply an extension of the king's will who mindlessly obeys all orders, but someone to lead others when the king cannot. He pointed his blade at her. Deku, do you understand, Shinra Tsubaki? Deku locked eyes with hers, trying to convey the seriousness of her every question. She looked back at the words for a moment, before opening her mouth to respond. Unfortunately, instead of words, she vomited a massive stream of blood before having another coughing fit. Deku, I think I exaggerated. Her hand glowed gold and addressed Tsubaki. A golden aura enveloped the demon's body and began to heal the wound. Deku turned to Tsubaki and tried to finish his argument. Deku, Tsubaki, I'll leave you with a choice. He waved his hand towards the stage. Deku, there's a room behind the stage where you can rest. If any time you want, you can leave this little test of mine and go into that room and relax. I will do nothing to stop or discourage it. Or else you can continue this test in the next 20 minutes, or else I will beat her, break her bones over and over again, and leave her in agony like you've never felt before. But in return, you'll learn how to fight, how to keep fighting even with a broken body, how to apply your hard-won skills in a real battle. For I tell you, one day you will find yourself in a situation like this where you face an enemy who will smash your face to the ground, break your bones like twigs and dye the ground red with their blood. The only difference between then and now is that you will be alone. You'll have the rest of the nobility, your comrades and friends there by your side, so you'll be able to get away as you can today, not without leaving them behind. And I won't insult you by even suggesting that you abandon them willingly. But make no mistake, it doesn't matter if you choose to stay and fight or just run away. Not like you are now, against that kind of enemy, your sacrifice will not do against him, because he will kill you, you and your friends without the slightest hesitation. Deku formed a smile. Deku, that's why I'm going to teach you. I will teach you to cut without hesitation, to strike without restraint so that when the time comes, you will be able to fight and be able to win. Fully healed, Tsubaki placed her hands under her body and stood up. She staggered for a second before finding her balance, and she bounced a few times on her toes before taking a stance. Not bothering to pick up her broken weapon, she simply assumed a basic boxing stance, hands close to her head and leading with her left foot and shoulder. Tsubaki, I don't think you need an answer, Deku-san. Deku's smile intensified. She really was willing to face him unarmed. Deku extended his hand and blue flames appeared on it, and it began to expand until it formed the shape of a naginata. He threw the gun at Tsubaki, who took the gun by surprise before assuming a moon stance with it. Deku, allow me to remind you, Shinra Tsubaki, that after I'm done with you, it would be your teammates who will be tested next. And after them shall be their king. So if you want to stop me or at least weaken me enough to lessen your burden even a little, then bring me down. Without hesitation, without restraint, you must strike me as if you were willing to kill me, or else you will not leave a mark on me. Now will you prove yourself worthy of your title, Queen of Sona's Citri? As soon as Deku saw that she was ready, he said, Deku, let's get started then. So he continued to train members of the Sona nobility, including Sona. A few days later. Currently inside the halls of Kuoh Academy, most of the students were leaving to go home as the time had already passed. However, although it was closing time, it was still possible to see some students walking through the corridors. Among them was Deku, who walked through the halls calling attention where he went with all eyes on him. He was heading towards the Occult Research Club room at Rias's request. As soon as Deku entered the room, he saw Rias sitting at her desk with Akino there beside her making tea. Kaneko was sitting on a couch while eating a chocolate bar, and Kiba was sitting next to her while polishing his sword. While Issei was sitting next to Asia, who smiled when she saw Deku. Akino, era Deku-kun, she said as she poured the tea. Kaneko-senpai, she said waving to Deku. Kiba, Deku-senpai, he said in greeting. Rias, I'm glad you came, Deku-kun, she said with a smile, as she crossed her legs slowly, which gave a nice view of her panties, resulting in a perverted expression on Issei. Deku, well, you invited me, he said and looked straight into Rias' eyes, who blushed heavily at the intensity of the gaze. Rias admitted that she had a huge crush on Deku. At first it was due to him being very handsome and also her being a fan of his. However, With time and with her starting to live with Deku, she started to like him a lot. He was intelligent and mature, as well as cooking well, and was very kind and had several qualities difficult to be mentioned. He was basically one of the charming princes from the stories she saw in her childhood. However, she also knew that her queen Akino and her tower Kaneko and Sona and Tsubaki liked Deku. However, before Rias could do anything, she needed to settle the matter of her marriage to Riser. Deku, so, what did you want to talk about? He asked as he crossed his arms. Rias, I would like to invite you to accompany us to the Forest of Familiars, she said while looking at Deku. Deku, really? I thought only rookie demons go there. Didn't Sona find a problem? He asked, curious. Only recently reincarnated demons go to the Forest of Familiars to be able to obtain a familiar, so Deku thought Sona would go due to Saji. Rias, well, Sona has no problem, he said nervously as Sona didn't even come to school. Although surprisingly, Sona and no student council members had come to the academy today, as they were not in a position to do so due to Deku's training. Rias knew that Sona asked Deku to train her, and although she felt a little jealous, she was kind of glad she didn't miss out on the same. From what Sona told him, Deku had literally broken their bodies just to rebuild them at the base of the beating. They were unable to come to class the next day due to their body not being able to handle it. But from the looks of it, the results were remarkable, a good improvement in just a few days of training. Asia, what is a familiar? She asked innocently. Rias, familiar. An existence that becomes the hands and feet of us demons. They can do demon work. Handing out flyers is usually a family member's job. It was also a task for newcomers. But familiars aren't exclusive to demons. Also, here's my familiar. A red bat appeared in Rias' palm after making a sound. A bat the same color as Rias' hair. It had a noble atmosphere just like that. Issei and Asia looked curiously. Akino, this one is mine. The thing that Akino summoned was something that looked like a palm-sized oni. Asia found them extremely cute, while Deku started comparing them to Tanjiro. Kaneko tilted her head to the side. Kaneko, this is Shiro. She had summoned a white kitten and was hugging him. Asia, oh Issei-san, he's too cute for us to adopt. She spoke excitedly and walked over to Kaneko, who hugged the cat defensively. Asia, Kaneko-chan, is it okay if I adopt your Shiro-san, please? Kaneko, no, you can't. Asia made a sad face while fiddling with her skirt, while Kaneko gave her a weird look. Rias, so I'd like to invite you to go Deku-kun, even if you're only part demon, you still have that right, she said, smiling slightly at Izuku. Deku almost smiled inwardly at this, as he knew what Rias wanted. From the looks of it, Rias had told her brother and superiors that Izuku, known as the Black Swordsman, was in Kuoh City. And so the demons seemed to be trying to bring Deku to their side by using the right to a familiar to sort of buy his loyalty. Deku, very well, he said to Rias, who smiled. Scene change. Forest of the Relatives, 2 halves. Family forest. This forest is beautiful and dense, it's full of nature, the trees were so big it dazzled the sunlight, there was a big one in it that ran all over the forest, dazzling the view. In that forest were currently 6 people who seemed to be calmly waiting. It was Rias Gremory and his nobility, Akino Himejima, Yuro Kiba, Kaneko Tuju, Asia Argento, and Issei Haida who were waiting calmly in the forest. They all turned around when they felt a pulse of energy surge, and when they turned around they saw an unknown magic circle. When the magic circle's light disappeared, Deku was revealed to be wearing a blue t-shirt along with black pants and sneakers and also a blue blouse. Next to him was Ophis, who was wearing her usual gothic outfit. Rias, Deku-kun, I see you brought friends, she said, looking at Ophis. Deku, yes, he said, nodding his head. Kaneko narrowed her eyes at Ophis, mainly because another loli was trying to steal her place next to Izuku. It looked like Ophis also sensed Kaneko and narrowed her eyes at the girl. Rias, and who are you? Ophis, I'm O. Deku, her name is Fiz, he said while covering the mouth of Ophis, who looked at him. Deku knew that if Rias heard Ophis' name, she would associate her with the dragon god of beginning, as he was sure Rias knew Ophis, and he didn't want everyone to know that precisely the Ouroboros dragon was with him. Seeing Deku's action, the Infinity Dragon understood and turned his gaze to Rias. Ophis, I am Fies, she said in such a monotone voice that even Kaneko was surprised. Rias turned her gaze to Deku and said, Rias, I see. Where did you steal it? She questioned, smiling, causing Deku to cast an attracted look at her. He sighed as Rias' nobility laughed at him. Deku, don't be fooled by her looks, she's older than all of us combined, he said, causing everyone to widen their eyes. Rias, what? Is she a supernatural being? She questioned everyone. Ophis, dragon, she replied, causing everyone to widen their eyes. Kiba, dragon, he spoke, totally shocked. Akino, era. Rias, is she the one you said looks like Kaneko? Deku agreed. The moment Ophis heard this, she gained a smile as she studied her chest in pride and satisfaction. Ophis, exactly, big-breasted, red-haired girl, she said, causing everyone to laugh, and Rias blushed with embarrassment. Who wants me? Without warning, a man wearing ragged clothes appeared from a treetop. Asia, who's there? She screamed, scared. Hello, young people, my name is Satuji from Madara City. I'm a devil in training. My goal is to become the home teacher. Deku's eyes twitch in annoyance. Satuji, if your goal is to find many familiars, then you came at the right time, for sure. The full moon is ready to help you decide, and I will be your guide. He took it when Deku snorted, twitching in annoyance. Akino, as you can see, Satuji is obsessed with making things rhyme. She giggled, finding great amusement in seeing how upset Deku was. Rias walked up to the home teacher. Rias, Satuji-san, I brought the ones I told you about. She basically introduced Deku and his friends. Deku didn't say anything, he just had a lazy look watching a slime appear. Asia, hello? She said in her normal voice. Issei yo? Ophis, like Deku, didn't say anything, but the reason was different since she didn't care about such an insignificant being like Satuji. Deku looked at the slime that was walking and threw a small, invisible blast of energy. What killed the slime? Only he didn't expect a bunch of slimes to fall out of nowhere on his clothes and women's clothes, leaving only Kiba and Issei out. Everyone's clothes started to corrode. Satuji, a slime, he loves to eat clothes of women in particular. Women's clothes started to corrode because of the slimes. They were embarrassed, except for Akino. Ophis was surprised by the slimes, but before she could do anything, they had already started to eat away at her clothes. Deku quickly used a water magic on himself to remove the slime, but the slime had already corroded his shirt, leaving your body to sample. Asia and Kaneko turned their faces in embarrassment so they wouldn't see Deku's body, even though Kaneko wanted to see it. Akino watched, releasing waves of insatiable lust. Rias was also looking lustfully at Deku's body, but who also had a hint of greed. Did Ophis also look at him with a little lust? Akino and Rias looked lustfully at Deku, while Issei lustfully looked at them. Not just for them, but for all the women present there. Deku, seeing Issei's perverted look, soon took off a black coat with a big Nike symbol. He took the coat and put it on Ophis, preventing Issei from seeing her lustfully. Ophis looked at him with a little wide eyes, but soon her eyes turned her attention to the girls who looked at her with envy for Izuku's gesture. Akino, Rias, Asia and Kaneko expected some reaction from Kiba, but he only knew how to look at him, scratching the back of his head in shame, feeling ashamed for not having done anything. Well, they didn't expect anything from Issei, as he was in a dream world imagining Rias, Akino, Asia and Kaneko's breasts. Deku snapped his fingers so the women were dressed again. What made Issei a little annoyed? Rias, thank you, Deku-kun. She gave a relieved smile to Izuku, who smiled back, waving his hand. Rias wanted Deku to do to her what he did to Fies, but she was already glad he helped. Akino, era fufufu, thank you, Deku-kun. she said sensually, and then received a serious look from Deku, which made her tremble with excitement. Akino, Era, how cold. Deku didn't say anything in response. Asia, thank you, Deku-san, she said in a cheerful tone. Kaneko, thank you, senpai. Deku looked at the slimes that were on the floor and swung his foot so that an air cut came out and went towards the slimes. Issei no! He screamed, falling to his knees on the floor. Issei, why did you kill them? Because? He was crying comically, which made Rias embarrassed. Kaneko punched him in the head. Kaneko, pervert. Deku, He turned around, getting everyone's attention. Kaneko, what is it, senpai? Deku didn't answer, and when she was about to ask again, he disappeared in a blur, which surprised her. With Deku, he was running through the forest following an energy he had just felt. With Deku, he was running following the slightly strong magical energy, the strongest energy he felt in that forest. He came close to a mountain where there was a huge light blue western dragon with azure blue scales. The western dragon soon noticed him, as his chaotic aura was not easy to suppress. Dragon, who are you, demon? The dragon roared in a very feminine voice. The western dragon tried to intimidate the demon with its roar. Deku, how interesting, he said, looking at the western dragon. The light blue dragon looked at Deku with a slight expression of surprise on its draconic face. Deku, you're the strongest familiar here, aren't you? The dragon shook its head in response. Deku, what's your name? I don't remember you even being a dragon. Dragon, I am Dragon of Karma and Chaos, one of the 5 dragon kings, Tiamat. She proudly introduced herself. Deku's eyes widened at the slightest, and her mouth turned into an O shape. Deku, so it was you, how fun. Tiamat narrowed her eyes, already suspecting what he wanted. Deku, I feel Drake's aura coming from you. Have you ever had intercourse with the red celestial dragon? He asked, causing Tiamat to widen her eyes in his draconic face. Tiamat, never mention the name of this bastard again. She gave a loud and powerful roar that started to freeze everything in an area of 500 meters. The ice froze the trees and other family members who lived in the forest in the area. Deku didn't even bother to defend himself, as he had the Ice King's spirit's blessing. Tiamat looked at the demon, in surprise to see that he hadn't been frozen. Deku, I see, but the ice element doesn't work on me, he said calmly, snapping his fingers to defrost the entire area. Deku, but why do you hate him? I feel you hold quite a grudge, he said, approaching Tiamat. Tiamat, that bastard abandoned me while I was pregnant. Deku looked at her, and then sat down next to the Dragon King. Deku, I see, but I came here to see if you want to be my familiar. Tiamat, you have courage. I would never be anyone's pet. Deku got up and started walking back to the forest, which left Tiamat a little shocked. Deku, well, since you don't want to, I can't force you to do anything. I don't like forcing one of mine to follow me. Tiamat looked at him, trying to see her essence, but when she saw, her entire body trembled. The immense black hole that devours everything within its reach. An unsurpassable, unchanging void that cannot be touched. Tiamat felt in this place. A place where life is non-existent, a primordial force that prevents any living being from living. She saw a body sleeping in the distance. It seemed to be what ruled that immeasurable and infinite place. Her body trembled at the sight of the higher existence in front of her. A body that shouldn't wake up no matter what or how. Deku noticed this and said, Deku, I see you tried to analyze my aura. Sorry for my late introduction. My name is Izuku Midoriya, or as they call me, Deku. Known to the world as the King of the Mad Dragons. Tiamat lunged at him, even though her body was refusing to move. She couldn't let anyone talk about the Mad Dragon King so easily. Though she's never seen the Mad King. The King of Destruction was someone who represented the spire of all dragons, even though he only appeared a short time ago. Tiamat had seen several male dragons who had tried to make her their own. Of course, none could, as they faced the wrath of the Dragon Queen. Her two precious daughters wanted so much to meet the Dragon King. It was a goal she wanted to at least fulfill her precious daughter's wish. In the rumors she heard, the King of Destruction was so huge, so big that his head touched the sky. On his head something like completely white hair descended in the form of a mane. On his head, several horns, 14 in total, spread over his hair. Just looking at him makes all the dragons kneel. So she couldn't let a simple demon call himself the Mad King. Deku, seeing the Dragon Queen advancing towards him, just narrowed his eyes, which made her kneel down. Deku, you are reckless for attacking me. He walked towards Tiamat, who was being crushed to the ground. Mom, what's all this noise? A girl who had the same aura as Tiamat came out of the cave along with two others. The three looked at their mother, who was being crushed. Tiamat F. She didn't finish when she felt her daughter's aura. You, how dare you hurt my mother? He yelled as his aura went out. The others looked annoyed at the demon, who was looking at them calmly. The three's eyes glowed blood red as scales began to cover their bodies. Deku looked at Tiamat and smiled. One of the girls had a similar appearance to Tiamat. Her draconic body was light blue with azure blue scales. And the last one had an orange-red draconic body with glowing blood-colored scales. The other had an icy white draconic body with white scales with slight shades of gray. Deku, you already had drag, but white? This is weird. Don't compare us to that damned one. He left my mother alone to take care of us. Deku, I see, but lower your tone to talk to me. The three didn't care and advanced towards Deku, who calmly dodged the blows. Deku, you? He pointed to the boy who had the same one as Tiamat. Deku, you have the same elements as your mother, ice and fire. He turned his attention to the white. Deku, you already possess the properties of fire and lightning. He turned his attention to the red. Deku, you already possess the elements of fire and wind. The three were surprised by this, but soon ignored it because they wanted to avenge their mother. Deku, stop. His voice, charged with magic, paralyzed the three. He started walking towards Tiamat, who was looking with a little bit of tears. He got close to her and started stroking the dragon's head. Tiamat, even though she couldn't make any movement, even with her eyes, was perplexed. Deku gave her a beautiful smile, which she blushed even in her dragon form. Deku, you have beautiful daughters, my dear. He disabled his eye ability, which prevented Tiamat from moving. Deku, well, take good care of your daughters, Tiamat. I, the king of mad dragons, bless them with great prosperity. He deactivated the paralysis of the three too. Tiamat's daughters looked at the demon in surprise. Tiamat, wait. She yelled, making Deku turn his attention to her. Deku, yes? Tiamat was swallowing her pride to speak. Tiamat, you want me as a familiar, don't you? Deku, well, yes, but I don't want to force you into anything. Besides, you have daughters to take care of. Tiamat, then let's make the pact. Deku turned to look at her carefully. Tiamat, my daughters. She turned her attention to her daughters, who stared at her intrigued. Yes, Mom? Tiamat, do you want to join me? Izuku Midoriya could have us. Deku raised an eyebrow like what she said. What do you mean, having us? The three were thoughtful. The being who calls himself the Dragon King had defeated them, both them and their mother. That is, he had the right to make them his own. Deku started to think along with them. A female dragon, when defeated by a male, is automatically transformed into her property. Deku's eyes widened as he remembered the dragon rule that said that when a female dragon is defeated by a male, she automatically becomes the male's property. Deku noticed this and soon tried to refute it, but before he could speak, Tiamat's daughter spoke before him. Deku, no, I don't want them to follow me because of dragon law. I want you to follow me for who I am, not this pathetic rule. He said, gesturing with his hands in denial. Tiamat, Ryu, Saphira, Mulan and Tail all smiled in response. Tiamat, it doesn't matter. Deku started to think. Tiamat, Ryu, Saphira, and Mulan were pleased, though they didn't really know he was the Dragon King. the Mad King. They took their human form. Tiamat had azure blue hair pulled to black that fell to her waist, snow-white skin that looked like porcelain, a navy blue dress that had a cut over both thighs that highlighted them, beautiful plump, smooth thighs white to the point of that if you slapped it, it would turn red. The dress went up to her neck, had a highlight on her skin from her huge breasts. On his head was a golden crown. His eyes were a turquoise blue color that sparkled in the sunlight that gave him a showy aura. Ryu had bright red hair down to the top of his back, with gold barrettes scattered around. Her white skin a little pale. His clothes were similar to those of his mother, Tiamat, only in a red shade matching the color of his hair, and he had several jewels with the opening in the thighs that revealed his slender body. Her huge breasts were trapped by the dress itself, which revealed her skin to her neck. He had a gold necklace with a purple jewel attached to the pendant. His arms were covered by a red velvet cloth and with gold bracelets. His eyes were a pool blue color that gave him an imposing aura. Saphira had silky pale white hair that came down to her waist. Her skin was albino. She wore a black dress with ruffles of snowflakes black. Her breasts weren't as big as her sister's, but they were big enough. She had a blood red and silver necklace type. Her rosy red eyes. Her appearance was cold and gave her an aura of royalty. Mulan had sky blue hair that came down to her ass. Her skin was fair. She wore a navy blue dress with some purple lilac bands under her breasts, waist, and belly. She had her left leg sampled with a gold spiral over her thighs. On her right leg was a pair of navy blue tights that matched her dress, and there was a small cut on the side of the leg. She had a jewel in the shape of a four-leaf clover, gold and red. She had some jewelry-studded necklaces. She had a mask that covered her mouth and nose but left them exposed. She also possessed something like a beret over her hair that left a long weave over her hair. Deku just looked at them with a calm and carefree expression, not caring about the beautiful beauties that were in front of you. Tiamat, Era Master. Deku, don't call me Master, I ask you to call me Deku or Izuku. Now it's time to make the pact or something, isn't it? He asked, staring at them. Tiamat, Ryu, Saphira, and Mulan blushed as they stared at them. They had already realized that their master was not a pervert like the dragons that had tried to possess them before. And the four of them could see that because he was always looking into their eyes, not even having the luxury of looking at their breasts, which was no joke. Tiamat, Ryu, Saphira, and Mulan never accepted a master for two reasons. First, they didn't want to serve someone weaker than them. The second reason was that whenever they changed into their human form, they attracted the lustful gazes of everyone. Men fantasized about looking at their huge breasts and plump ass. As they said, they'd make them their property. This disgusted them more than anything, so they took on anger and revulsion at any perverts who bumped into them. Besides, many didn't look so desirable in your eyes. Well, not in your eyes, right? Since any human would find them beautiful. Unlike their new master, who possessed a beauty worthy of them. Her master had dark green hair with black at the ends, and a long ponytail that reached down to the middle of her back. Even with the blouse, they saw that his body was very defined and trained, not being exaggerated or average. Being perfect, for what they were looking for. They also saw tattoos on his arms and neck, not that it changed anything, but it was really cute to see him with them. He was the ideal master they were looking for. One who wasn't perverted, didn't have lust over their bodies. What seemed to happen the other way around, since the ones who would have lust in full swing would be them. Tiamat, Ryu, Saphira, and Mulan knew that the mating season was coming and that soon they would want to have their male. Izuku's body that was already making them twitch in lust and desire. When the mating season came where they would go into CIO, their pheromones would be on edge, and as they had realized that Deku was part dragon, they couldn't let a chance like this slip away, right? Although Ryu, Saphira, and Mulan are inexperienced when it comes to hex, Tiamat was another case. As a dragon that has lived for hundreds, even thousands of years, she knew all too well how to use her slender body to instill desire in males. They made the pact with Deku and gave him a big smile. Tiamat leapt into her new master's arms, pushing her massive breasts. Tiamat, Fufu Master, wasn't it enough that I had to take my daughters too? She said sensually, releasing some pheromones. Ryu, Saphira, and Milan gnashed their teeth in frustration when their mother had outwitted them. Deku looked at Tiamat, then at Ryu, Saphira and Milan with a calm look and then said, "Deku, what man would refuse a request for beauties like that?" He said in a sincere tone, making the four of them blush in response. Deku, besides. He turned his face to Tiamat and approached her ear, then whispered, "Deku, besides, a dragon needs mating partners, doesn't it?" He whispered sensually, sending shivers of arousal through Tiamat. "Deku, I hope you can handle it, because they will only have rest when my libido is satiated." He licked her lips and pulled Tiamat closer to him, giving her a hug that pressed her breasts against his chest. Deku took Tiamat's chin and lifted her face, bringing her closer to his face. Tiamat felt her face flush in response, and she stretched her lips in anticipation of the kiss, closing her eyes to enjoy the affection she would receive. She waited seconds and seconds, but nothing came. So she decided to open her eyes and saw that Deku had turned his face away. "Deku, why? Did you want a kiss, pervert?" he said playfully, seeing Tiamat's frustrated face. Deku came out of the hug and said, "Deku, well, maybe someday, hee." So Deku decided to go back to where the others were. With others, Asia had a spirit dragon in her hands, while Issei hadn't gotten any familiars. At that, a desperate voice was heard in Issei's conscience. "Drake, run fast, Issei, she is coming, she is coming." It screamed in its wielder's mind, startling Issei at first. "Issei, what is it, Drake?" "Drake, no time for explanations when your life is in danger, just run away, damn." He felt Tiamat's aura that was very close, then his draconic face turned to fear as he saw that she would kill yet another wielder. Everyone saw that Deku showed up with 4 beauties. "Issei, and oh!" he screamed, falling to the ground in tears. "Issei, why only that daddy has so beautiful women?" he said, causing Ryu, Saphira and Milan to turn their attention to him. They already realized that he would be a typical pervert, which made them shoot an irritated look at Issei. "Issei, damn, Deku just taking the beauties of the world and usurping for themselves, damn you good for nothing useless." He started raining insults on Deku, who scratched his head with a drop of sweat. "Issei, look at the size of those boobs," he said, looking at the 4 of them, analyzing each one's bust size. "Issei, the red-haired one has 100 centimeters breasts, the white-haired one is 87 centimeters, the blue-haired one is 105 centimeters, and the blue-haired one is 112 centimeters. How enviable." Ryu, Saphira and Milan rushed at him and punched him in the head. Saphira, damn pervert, she screamed angrily and embarrassed at the same time. Ryu, that's why women don't like you, you pervert. At that they turned their attention to Deku. Milan took Deku's hand and sank it into her breasts, surprising the Mad King. "Deku, what the?" He was going to speak but was interrupted by Milan. "Milan, master, do you like big breasts or small ones?" she said, pointing to Saphira's breasts. Saphira, oh you. Saphira had several anger marks and a bulging vein on her forehead. Milan, so, master? Do you like the small ones or the big ones? Now everyone was paying attention to Deku, even Ophis was waiting for the answer, looking at her body. Deku's body unconsciously began to shake as he remembered what his wives said. The first was never to ask a woman's age. The second was to always compliment a woman, no matter her appearance or physique. And the third one, don't say anything about small or large breasts, it will make any woman upset. Deku, stop with these rude discussions, don't bother me with it. And if it's up to me to choose, I'd prefer Saphira. He screamed, but soon covered his mouth as he realized he had broken the rule his wives always told him to follow. Saphira smiled confidently at the defeated expression of her mother, Ryu and Milan. Deku coughed to get everyone's attention. Deku, don't take it personally, everyone has a taste. I don't care about the size of your breasts or your ass, or how you look. None of that matters if you don't look at this person's character. Milan looked at him, her eyes forming small tears. Milan, So you don't hate big boobs, do you? Deku nodded before turning his attention to Satuji, who was transfixed. Deku, are you? It didn't end when Satuji came out of paralysis and knelt down. Satuji, Tiamat-sama. He shouted, bowing to the strongest of the 5 dragon kings. Tiamat, Satuji-san, it's nice to see you again. I believe you would be the home teacher now, right? She asked, tilting her head to the side, looking at the man in front of her. Satuji, no, but my test is coming up. And I hope to pass. He said proudly as Tiamat nodded with a small smile. Both Akino and Rias were looking at Ryu, Saphira, Mulan and Tiamat as rivals, especially Rias, who was looking seriously at the 4 of them. Already Akino was dressing up, imagining Deku with the 4 of them in bed. Satuji, so these are your daughters, Tiamat-sama? What do they do here? He asked, curious. Tiamat, we made a pact with Deku-kun, and then we became his family. She said, shocking everyone there. Tiamat looked at Deku with a perverted smile, which sent chills down the King of Destruction's spine. Rias, how strong is he really? She thought, unable to believe that someone her age was so strong. Kiba and Kaneko didn't know whether to be impressed or scared of Deku. The fact that he was able to defeat Tiamat and her daughters only showed how powerful he was. Kiba, for him to take down a dragon said to have the same level of power as the Satan class, I'm speechless. I just hope he remains an ally and doesn't become an enemy. He thought, shuddering at the thought of Deku being an enemy. Satuji could only look at Deku with nothing but respect. Satuji, you surprised me, young man. I didn't expect you to make Tiamat-sama and her daughters your family. You have the most powerful and beautiful familiars in this forest. I hope you take care of them. Deku, I think it's easier for them to take care of me, since they're perverted. He didn't finish his speech when Tiamat, Ryu, Saphira and Mulan delivered a powerful punch imbued with their powers to Deku's head. Ryu, be baka. She screamed, extremely embarrassed. Saphira, never say that again, you baka. She screamed, serious and embarrassed at the same time. Deku got up from the small crater that formed in the ground when he hit. Deku, where's the blonde? Everyone turned their attention to her, before seeing her happily running towards them. Deku, is this your familiar Asia? He asked, getting a nod from her. Asia, yes, this is Rassel. She said, smiling. Satuji, spirit dragons are very rare. They are high-level dragons, although they are not as strong as a dragon king, and they must be tamed as children or else they will become uncontrollable as adults. He explained to everyone. Tiamat, normally, a spirit dragon is a dragon that doesn't commit to someone with a bad heart. But it seems that girl has a very pure heart. She said, surprised, and was also surprised by the look Rassel gave Deku, a look of pure admiration. Deku placed his hand on the dragon's head and began to caress. Deku, good boy, protect Asia, okay? Rassel, gagok. He made a cute yes and flapped his wings. Satuji, surprise boy, isn't that dragon attacking you? Deku, should I? He asked a question back, so Satuji inclined his head. Satuji, the male dragon hates males of other races. Unexpectedly, it seems that this dragon is liking you, or rather, it seems that it is obeying you as if it has been bewitched. Deku, of course you would obey me. I am the king of mad dragons. Tiamat, it seems you have the ability to get along well with dragons and even tame them to some extent without realizing it. That's an impressive master. She said, surprised just like her daughters. Deku nodded, as much of this affinity was due to him being friends with Sung, who was the prince of dragons, the son of the dragon race progenitor, Bahamut, who taught him many things about dragons. Izuku turned his gaze to Rias and her nobility. Deku, so, are you going to want anything else, Rias? He asked, looking at her. Rias, and no, that's all. She said, stuttering as she still couldn't understand what was going on. Deku nodded before turning his attention to Tiamat, who was hugging him. Deku, are you ready to go, Tiamat? He asked calmly. Tiamat bowed her head. Tiamat, what do you mean? She asked, obviously not knowing what Deku meant. Deku, well, I forgot to control my eyes and ended up destroying your house. You are more than welcome to my home, after all you are my familiar. That is, you are my responsibility, and now it is my duty to take care of you, I mean of you. He chuckled, allowing a smile to cross his face. Ryu, Tiamat, Mulan and Saphira sighed, before blushing heavily as they understood what he said. Tiamat, thank you, Deku-kun, she said calmly, but she was still a little nervous. Deku turned his gaze to Rias. Deku, well that's it Rias-san, until next time. He said to create a magic circle underneath him, Ophis, Saphira, Mulan, Tiamat and Ryu making them disappear. Rias and her nobility just stared at the place where Deku was. They hadn't been able to understand what was happening. And honestly, they didn't even want to.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.